Hello everyone, if you're new to my channel, consider liking and subscribing. It will make me feel wonderful if you do that. Thanks. By the way, I also have another Naruto and Luffy fanfiction channel. If you are interested, link is in the description.
One Piece, Luffy's Friend by PizzaFan123. The anime One Piece started with Monkey D. Luffy's childhood friend, Grey D. Aki, being on his crew to start with him as a pirate. She will not be the strongest. That will never get hit. Adios.
Chapter 1. Makino was working at the bar and looked at me sadly. "Why did you cut your hair?" I frowned and said. "It got in the way. I also like my new look. My light brown hair stopped at the middle of my neck and was messy since I cut it yesterday. I was too lazy to brush it." She sighed and handed me a glass of apple juice. I heard some noise and looked to see Shanks, his crew and Luffy. I grinned. I was getting bored and they ate. Always fun to be around. Shanks' eyes widened when he saw me and Luffy had a big grin. Shanks sat next to me and Luffy sat on his other side. Shanks asked me, "Why do you cut your hair?" I grinned and said, "Long hair is stupid and I'm gonna be a pirate." The crew sat at tables around us and they laughed at what I said. Shanks did too. Luffy shouted out, "Yeah, me too." Shanks patted me on the head and I yanked my head away from him. He said, Sure. I growled and gave him a glare and said at the same time as Luffy, "Hey, what's with the tone?" I looked over at him and was surprised to see a kitchen knife in his hands. I asked him, "What are you doing, Luffy?" He grinned and said, "I show you I can become a pirate." He then stabbed under his eye. My eyes widened and I yelled, "What the hell? Are you stupid?" Shanks started freaking out and snatched the knife from him. He soon got a bandage for it and I noticed or heard his sniffling. He said, "Ha, didn't hurt." I laughed under my breath as Shanks said, "Lair, don't do something stupid like that again," I said. "Even I'm not that crazy, Luffy." He just grinned at me and I grinned back. Shanks said to us, "You both can't be pirates. You can't be pirates. You can't swim," Luffy said. "So I'll stay on board." I nodded. He said, "Me and Aki will become pirates." I smiled and Shanks said, "Okay, calm down. Luffy, have some juice. Aki, have a refill." I nodded and got a full glass and Luffy drank his at the same time as I did. Shanks slammed his hand on the table and laughed loudly and said, "Ha, pirates don't drink juice." I slammed my cup on the counter as did Luffy. I glared at him, my face feeling hot. Luffy yelled, "You tricked me, mean Shanks," I mumbled under my breath. "Stupid Shanks." Luffy got up and walked up to Ben, Shanks's first mate. I looked at Shanks and asked, "Hey Shanks." He looked at me with an raised eyebrow and I said, "Why did you become a pirate?" He shrugged and said back, "I dunno, why are you having second thoughts?" The last part one knew he was teasing me and I glared at him. I slapped his arm when I saw him mouth to Luffy, "Can't swim." He laughed and messed up my hair a bit hard. I gave a grunt to stop myself from saying ow. I grinned and said loudly, "Hey Luffy, I made the great caption." Shanks say, "Ow." His crewmates laughed and Luffy did too. Shanks narrowed his eyes at me and said, "Really?" I puffed up my chest to make me look bigger and nodded. Shanks smacked me in the back of the head. I yelped, "Ow." He laughed and stuck his tongue at me and said, "That's what you get for lying." He and Luffy started talking about whatever and I zoned out. A large bag brought me out of my daydream and I saw one half of the door fall to the floor. A big guy came in along with other big guys behind him. The leader of them said, "We are mountain bandits. We won't cause any trouble. We want to buy 10 barrels of sake." I looked down and noticed Shanks and Luffy had food. No fair. I'm hungry, but knew I should not say anything. The leader mountain bandit was almost on top of me. Makino shifted a little and she said, "Sorry, we don't have any." I looked at her worried. "They better leave her alone." I bit my lip. I would protect her, but I'm scared. "I will never say that. I will become a pirate," Shanks said. "Sorry, it seems like my crew drank the place dry. Here, have this." He held the bottle out and I was shocked when the mountain bandit smashed it over his head. He just sat there and I growled under my breath. How dare they do that to Shanks? Shanks will surely show them now. I heard the leader say, "That's not good enough for us. I have a 8 million belly over my head." He slapped a poster down and I saw his face on it. This guy angered me. He'll get it from Shanks, that's for sure. He grabbed his poster bag and I heard Shanks say, "Ah, the floor is wet." He started picking up the broken glass shards and Makino quickly came over to him and said, "Please, I'll do it." She went to his side and I held my breath when I saw him pull out a sword. He swiped the sword across the bar and all the glass fell along with their dinner. I gasped under my breath. The guy said, "You like cleaning, then fine, here you go." They left laughing and I stared at Shanks. He made a sound and his whole crew started laughing. I scowled and moved next to Luffy. I had a little sake spilled on me. Shanks started laughing and the crew said things like, "Ha, he got you, caption. Look how stupid that made you look." Shanks was laughing the hardest. Luffy handed me a fruit knowing I was mad and my stomach growled. I took it and decided to eat it instead of keeping my mind on Shanks doing nothing. I started eating it and I heard Luffy yell, "Why are you laughing?" Everyone grew silent. That was disgraceful. Why didn't you fight them? Who cares if he had more men? You're not a man. Nor a pirate. This fruit tasted gross. But me being annoyed, I just kept on eating, Shanks said. "Luffy, it's just a little booze. It's not a big deal." Luffy muttered whatever and sat next to me eating a fruit like mine. Shanks was not looking at us and he said, "Aki, Luffy, you can't eat your problems away." He saw what we were eating and for some reason freaked out. "Hey, don't eat that." My eyes widened as me and Luffy stared at Shanks. He grabbed me and Luffy and shook us upside down. My eyes were wider than before. Luffy's head then dropped and hit the floor. "What the?" I felt a pain in my head and Shanks dropped us. Shanks yelled, "You both just ate a devil fruit. Luffy, you ate the gum gum no mi, and Aki, you ate the inu inu no mi. Luffy, you're a rubber boy, and Aki, you are now part dog. You'll never be able to swim." I and Luffy yelled at the same time. "No," Shanks yelled back. "You idiots, we were sitting at the bar and those stupid mountain bandits were back. They were logging," and the leader said. That Shanks was an idiot, dumb pirates. Luffy jumped up and yelled, "Hey asshole, shut up." He stared at Luffy and glared and forgot my fear when I looked to see him near Luffy. I stood in front of him with my fist drawn and said, "He's right, don't mess with Shanks. He is a way better man than you are." The guy growled and grabbed both me and Luffy. I yelled and so did Luffy. Makino yelled something too, but we were pulled away. They all went to drag us somewhere and decided to drag us around. While we were walking, he would smack us around. He didn't hurt Luffy because he was a rubber boy. His hits hurt me, but I felt like the pain was numbed a bit, like it only hurt half of what it should be. The leader laughed. "I see, so they are a rubber person and dog girl. I think the circus will give us money for them." Luffy was screaming at him and I snarled trying to bite him, which surprised me. My mouth hurt and I touched my teeth to find then sharpened blood in my mouth. I heard the mayor behind us yell, "Please let them go, I'll pay for them. I don't know what they did, but I will." I started shocked that the mayor would try to help us like that and Luffy whispered, "Mayor," the bandit said. "Nah, they pissed me off too much." He threw me on the ground and I landed on my stomach hard. Before I could get up, a bandit placed a hard boot on my back and I was stuck to the ground. I heard someone say, "I wondered what happened when no one showed up at the port." I looked up and grinned when I saw Shanks. I heard Luffy whisper his name and when I looked over to him, the leader's boot was Luffy's face. I growled low in my throat and was too angry to care. The leader bandit said, "Oh, it's you lowly pirates," Shanks said with a dark look on his booze on me or even spit at me. "But no one messes with the people I care about. I won't forgive them." The leader laughed and said, "Forgive ha." One of the bandits put a pistol at Shanks's head. My eyes widened and I looked on in fear. He said, "So you are going to die?" The leader snapped as he walked forward. "What?" Shanks answered. "Pistols are for actions, not threats." The bandit got shot by Lucky Roo and I wondered what would happen next. Ben took out the rest of the men and the leader was the only one left. I was frozen on the ground. The leader stammered. "They started it with us," Shanks said. "I thought you had a bounty on your head." He threw something, grabbed me and Luffy and made us get on a boat in the middle of the ocean with him. Luffy yelled, "Stupid mountain bandit, let us go." I glared at him and started growling. He dropped us in the ocean and I tried swimming, but could not. Damn it, Shanks was right. Oh God, I'm going to die. I can't swim and neither can Luffy. A big wave showed up and a giant animal swallowed him and his boat whole. I panicked when I saw it look towards us and then a shadow was in front of us. I saw who it was and yelled, "Shanks!" He glared at the monster and it swam away. I was hugging him and I saw Luffy do the same. I then looked at his arm and started crying on Shanks. "His arm, it's gone." Luffy was crying too, Ash said. "Shanks, your arm." He laughed and said, "It's okay, guys, I have another one. Come on, pirates don't cry." I just cried on him and he was swimming slowly until we got to shore. I yawned and tried to keep my eyes open, but I fell asleep. I woke on Shanks and next to a sleeping Luffy. I shivered, still wet. I looked at Shanks and then his arm. I sniffed and felt tears fill my eyes again. I said, "Sorry, Shanks." He smiled and said, "For what?" I said, panicked. "Your arm." He laughed. "It's okay. I'm happy you both are safe." I nodded and hugged him. A week later the crew was getting ready to leave. Me and Luffy were in front of Shanks. Luffy asked, "So you're leaving?" He said, "Yeah, are you both going to miss me?" We nodded and Luffy said, "Yeah, but I'm not gonna ask to join your crew. I'll have my own with Aki." I grinned at Luffy, happy to be on his crew. Shanks laughed and stuck his tongue out saying, "I don't think you or Aki have what it takes to be pirates," Luffy yelled, mad. "I'll show you, I'll become king of the pirates." I nodded and yelled too. "Yeah, and we'll have a better crew than your Shanks." He laughed at us and said, "Okay then, here you go Luffy, if you really believe that." My eyes widened when I saw him take off his hat and place it on Luffy's head. "I covered most of it, since it was big," Shanks said. "When you become king of the pirates, give it back to me. I'd treasure it a lot." I saw him crying and pretended not to notice. He then reached for something in his cape and placed a strap on the back of my head and let something rest on my forehead. I took it off and looked to see a pair of goggles. They were square and blue with an orange tint on the seeing part. Like Obito's from Naruto. I looked down when I felt tears go down my face. He said, "And you give those back to me when you make a name for yourself." I nodded and didn't look at him. He ruffled me and Luffy's hair and said bye to us. He got on the boat and Luffy waved. I yelled out, "Bye Ben, Usopp, Rue and Shanks." They waved to me and I felt tears fall down my face wishing he would stay. But I promised to myself, I will show him that I will make such a name for myself as a pirate. Everyone will know my name. Me and Luffy were playing and then his grandpa Garp came by and went to take away Luffy. I pulled my goggles over my eyes and glared at him, staring at Luffy. I said, "Leave my friend alone, you dumb old man." He glared at me and picked me up by the front of my shirt. He yelled in a booming voice, "Do you know who I am? I'm Marine Hero Monkey D. Garp." I stuck my tongue out and remembered that the Marines hated pirates. I yelled, "Marines are stupid. I'm gonna be a pirate, old man Marine." He punched me on the head and threw me somewhere. Luffy yelled at him, but Garp dragged him away. A while after that, Luffy came to me with this kid that had black hair and freckles and a scowl on his face. I grinned at Luffy, but wondered why he was hanging out with a boy older than him and so grumpy. I ran to Luffy and grinned. "Hey, haven't seen ya in a while." He hugged me and said, "Hey Aki, this is my brother, Portgas Diaz, and this is my best friend Gray Diaki." I nodded with a smile and he looked me up and down. I fixed the goggles over my eyes and said, "Luffy, you have a brother." He nodded with a grin and said, "Yeah, we are sworn brothers." Ace said, "Hi." We just hung around and talked and he was friends with after a while of being cold to me and Luffy yelling at him to stop being mean. I found out they lost a sworn brother named Sabo. I didn't talk about it and instead gave Luffy some of my meat from dinner to cheer him up and left Ace alone when they told me. When he left when I and Luffy were 14 and he was 17, I was sad. He said goodbye and left. I and Luffy are 17. We were in our boat, which was a small thing, and me and Luffy sat opposite each other. He was talking about how hungry he was and I nodded, a little hungry myself. A barrel was tied behind us, for what I don't know, but Luffy said it looked cool. I looked at him as he had a goofy grin on his face and a dazed look in his eyes. He was thinking about food, no doubt, which was probably meat. I yawned and looked him over. He was wearing a red vest, knee-length jeans, sandals and his prized hat Shanks gave him. He hasn't changed it the years I've known him and I'm happy about it. I yawned and lay on my back. I have a white cloth shirt, black loose leather pants and brown leather boots that have my pants tucked into them. My goggles right now that I got from Shanks were over my eyes so any sea spray didn't get in my eyes. I heard a weird noise and shot up to see a large whirlpool and shook a daydreaming Luffy and pointing at the large problem in the water. He just smiled and untied the barrel and took the lid off. He jumped in and I heard him yell, "Come in, Aki." Sighing at what no will be no space, I jumped in and on accident stepped on Luffy's leg. I smiled at him and tried to give us as much space as possible. I pushed my goggles up to my forehead and Luffy fell asleep. I touched my goggles and fell asleep tired and dreamed up a flashback. Me, Ace and Luffy were hanging around in a forest near the bandits' hut. I snuck in the forest there to hand out with them and Luffy was brought inside to do something by that really large orange-haired lady called Dayton. I took my goggles off and smiled at the memories they brought me. I didn't notice Ace snatch them away and go back where he was sitting. He was looking them over and I glared. Those are mine and no one is allowed to steal them. I forgot him being stronger than me when I stood up and clenched my fist angrily. I yelled, "Ace, give them back." He stared at me and smirked. Why should I? I felt the burning in my eyes but ignored it. Luffy tells me Ace hates it when people cry, I said. Because they are mine and are important to me. He was surprised that I screamed at him like that, but he didn't know the story, not like I thought about it then. I was just angry. Ace was 11 and I was 8. He shook his head and not looking away saying, "No," I growled in my throat, part of my inu no mi devil fruit thing and tackled Ace. We rolled around, but he winded up on top of me with him sitting on my stomach and holding my arms above my head by my wrists. I glared and snapped up trying to bit him. He threw the goggles a little bit away. I growled again and he used his free hand to punch me in the face. I winced and muttered an ow. He didn't use his full strength, but it hurt. My cheek already started to hurt. He said pissed off. "Why the hell is wrong with you?" I moved my lips to get a lot of spit in my mouth and He recoiled and got off, rubbing his face. I grabbed my goggles, but he tackled me in a headlock, choking me a bit. He yelled, "That's nasty, why did you do that?" I growled and snapped at him with my teeth and yelled back, "You hit and took my treasure from me." Pissed off, he punched me on the head and rubbed his knuckles in my head really hard like sandpaper. I winced and could not get out of his hold and I wouldn't use my evil fruit powers on him because it could kill him. I heard Luffy shout, "What the hell are you doing, Ace?" He stopped and threw me on my stomach and sat on my back. He said to Luffy, "She spit at me and tackled me to the ground," I said back. Ace Baka took my goggles. Luffy yelled, "Why would you do that, Ace? Those are like my straw hat because she got them from Shanks." He got off and pulled me up by my shirt. He asked, "Really?" I nodded, looking at the ground. He walked away and put something on my head. I smiled when I saw the goggles. He said in an annoyed voice, "Sorry, Aki?" I smiled at him and said, "It's okay, Ace. Someone taught me a while ago that you have to let things age." He frowned, but nodded. A while after that day I called him Aniki on accident. He was being nice to me that day and he stormed off with a pissed off expression. I flinched and looked at Luffy with a guilty expression. "Sorry Luffy, I didn't mean to say that. He's your brother." He grinned at me and said, "That's okay, Aki. You're my imouto anyway no matter what." I cried a little at that, not having family since I was born, but made him promise not to tell anyone. When he did leave, he called me his imouto and I figured he didn't want another sibling to look after since Sabo died soon after. I woke up with a gasp to find myself with my feet in Uffy's face, so I quickly moved away as much as I could. I shook Luffy awake, but still slept. I said, "Food's done." He jumped up and I grinned when he saw no food. He glared at me. Then we were bumped around and I heard a couple of voices. "I'm bringing this to the cellar." That was a little kid voice and I could hear the fear in it right away. Another more rough voice said, "We'll take it off your hands," the boy Voce stammered. "But we're not allowed," another one said. "The captain does not have to know." Luffy them jumped up and broke the barrel yelling "Wheel." I jumped to the side. I slept so well. I laughed to myself. "That's so Luffy." Luffy asked, "Who are you two?" They yelled back, "Who the hell are you?" They looked weak to me. Luffy said, "I'm Monkey D. Luffy." I said, "Yeah, I'm Grey D. Aki." They stared at me and I smirked at him and gave a wave. He pointed to a guy on the floor, sleeping, and said, "You should tell your friend not to sleep on the deck, he could catch a cold." The guys yelled at him. "You did that." I laughed again as they tried to attack him with swords and he cut them in half. They ran off dragging their friend with them and Luffy figured out where the food was. A pink-haired boy was clinging to his waist. But Luffy just walked into what seemed to be a food storage area. He went in a crate which had apples in it and he tossed me a couple. I ate them happily and I asked the boy, "What ya name?" He shook a bit and said, "K Kobe," Luffy asked. "Is this a pirate ship?" Kobe said. "A passenger ship turned into a pirate ship," I asked. "So are you a pirate or a passenger?" he answered. "For 2 years I've been on this ship when I went fishing for dinner, but it turned out to be a pirate ship and they captured me letting me be alive if I was their cabin boy." Luffy stared at him and said bluntly, "You're stupid." That was harsh but said, "Have to agree with you there, Luffy boy. It was the truth. Who does not do something because they are a scaredy cat? It's retarded." He sent me a grin and Kobe sulked with tears going down his face. He muttered, "Thank you for your honesty," Luffy asked, not hearing him. "Do they have boats around here? I need one if I'm going to be king of the pirates and Aki's going to be a pirate. Everyone will know the name of—" I grinned at the thought of my dream. The Kobe kid looked at us shocked and said, "You want to do what? That would mean you are pirates?" W both nodded and he said, "That means you're after the One Piece?" Luffy nodded again and Kobe stared at me. "Making a name for yourself like will mean you will have to fight a lot of people." I nodded with a grin. "What fun that will be," he yelled out. "Stupid, impossible, impossible. You won't be able to do it, impossible." I wanted to punch him, but Luffy did it for me. Kobe asked, "Why do you hit me?" Luffy shrugged and said bluntly, "Because I felt like it." I snickered at his answer. "The way you say things sometimes is just plain funny no matter how insulting it is," Kobe said. "It's okay, I'm used to it." I frowned a little. I got hit round by Ace and Luffy when we just to fight, Ace, or wrestle, Luffy or Ace. But he sounded depressed. I broke out of my thoughts when I heard Kobe say, "Die for it." Luffy say, "Yami and Aki will complete our dream no matter what." I nodded firmly in agreement. Kobe asked, "Could I have what it takes to be a Marine?" My eyes widened as Luffy asked, "Marine?" Kobe looked at me and I shrugged and said, I don't know, I hate Marines." His jaw dropped at my answer. "Well, I do. I'm a pirate and Marines are the enemy of the pirates," Kobe said. "Yeah, I'm going to become a Marine and beat up bad guys like I wanted to do ever since I was little. So I am willing to die for it. I could maybe become a Marine. Then I will beat people like Alvida." I heard a yell. "Who are you planning on beat? You dumb brat." This fat lady burst through and glared at Kobe who was shaking badly almost like he was dumped in cold water. Luffy stared at her and asked, "Who's the fat lady?" Hey, it might sound rude, but he was telling the truth. I'm surprised the ship did not sink. I waved at her with a smirk. "Hi whale lady." She glared at us and said or hollered, "Who dares to call me that? You dumb brats?" Kobe grabbed out arms and said, "Repeat after me. Lady Alvida is the most ugly, disgusting creature out in the ocean." I looked at Kobe and then me and Luffy cracked up laughing. She slammed this metal club on Luffy's head in anger and I smirked while Kobe squeaked in fear. I patted his head and said, "Don't worry, watch," Alvida yelled. "How is that possible?" Luffy grinned at her and exclaimed, "I'm a rubber boy." I heard someone come behind me as my ears twitched and I kicked a stomach hard without turning, and when I did turn, I saw him bent over, breathing heavy. I punched him in the face hard and he flew back into the ocean. Ops, too much power. You see, when I ate the Akuma no Mi I gained dog-like abilities. My hearing is really good, like a dog's. Strength is better than human. I can understand dogs and maybe a wolf if I try, have good sight, can grow sharp nails, have pointed ears, growl and snarl like a wolf or rabid dog, and made up some attacks myself. Anyway, Alvida glared at him and went to smash the wood on me. I grinned at her and when it came close to me it took a step aside and made my nails growl along. Then I slashed at the thing and steps a couple of steps back. The thing split in half and Luffy punched her in the face and she went flying. Her crew looked scared at us and I pouted at Luffy and said, "She didn't even get to know what I am. You're lucky with the fights." He grinned at me with a laugh and stared sternly at the crew of Alvida and said, Get a boat for Kobe because he wants to be a Marine. They nodded and looked at me. I glared and they ran off. I slapped a high five with Luffy and patted Kobe on the back with a smile. I looked around happily and frowned. I said to Luffy, "Luffy, the Marines are here." He smiled and said to Kobe, "Great, Kobe, you can go see them and join up." Kobe looked panicked as he said, "What? I can't do that. They will see me as a pirate." The boat was ready and we got on it. We were sailing bored out of our minds and then I shot up Luffy. "How do we know where we are going? We both can't navigate." He looked kind of panicked too now that I voiced it and Kobe said, "I can." "Where do you need to go?" Luffy asked. "Who is that Zoro guy you were talking about?" Kobe looked scared at the question. He said, "Roronoa Zoro is a demon and a bounty hunter." Luffy jumped up. "That's great, I'll get him to join my crew." I nodded. He might be strong. Kobe was freaking out like he did before and Luffy hit Kobe. "Why'd you do that?" Luffy shrugged and said, "Because I felt like it." I sighed. "He is too blunt sometimes." "Hey, what you gonna do?" Kobe said. "He's locked up at a Marine base." I stuck my tongue in disgust. "Yuck, Marines." Luffy sighed and his shoulders slumped. "Oh, man, he's weak then." Kobe freaked again. "No, he's is the demon. Roronoa Zoro." I shrugged and said to Luffy, "It could be a very dangerous challenge. Let's do it." Kobe made some whimpering sounds and Luffy agreed with me. Soon we ended up at the island and walked through town. Luffy went to a pear stand and gave the vendor a coin and took a bite. He asked her, "You know where Zoro is?" Everyone around went crazy and ran away. I laughed and we walked forward. Kobe said, "I heard Captain Morgan is here at the base." The people freak out again and Kobe said, "I wonder why they are doing that. I understand Zoro, but him?" I shrugged and stared off into space. Marines are garbage, though I can't hate this kid. What right do they have to kill us? I looked at Luffy and blinked to see us at the Marine base. "I should pay more attention more," Luffy said. "Maybe he is behind this wall." Kobe shook his head in a negative way and said, "No way would he be out in the—" I heard Luffy shout. I found him. He was on the top of the wall and I climbed after him and Kobe got up here at last. The guy looked beat up and he tied to a cross. He had a white shirt, some green thing around his waist, regular pants and short green hair. All he said, "Get lost, you're all an eyesore." I frowned. Well then, Kobe started freaking out saying something about, he's seen us, we're going to die." Luffy told him with a couple of laughs. "Yeah, I want him in our crew." I laughed along with him, but I think for a different reason. Kobe's face makes the weirdest expressions. His cowardness was getting very annoying though. I nodded at Luffy and said, "I'm with ya, Caption." He grinned happily at me saying it. I laughed again at the way it made him happy. Kobe panicked again and it was my turn to grin. This time in amusement to Kobe. Kobe then remembered what said before and looked at us with a scared and pain-filled look on his face. He stammered, "B but, he'll kill you B both." Luffy smiled and said, "Don't worry about it, me and Aki are too strong." Before anything else could be said, a clacking sound hit the wall and we all looked over to see a little girl with black hair on top of the ladder. Shish put her fingers to her lips in the hush sign and jumped to the other side with something in her hands. She was walking over to Zoro and I don't think he knew it yet. Of course Kobe would not be himself if he didn't panic, so he said to Luffy scared, "Luffy, go save her." All Luffy did was a shrug and say, "You do it then." Kobe looked at me trying to see if I would help her and all I said to him was, "It's fine with me, Luffy's the captain. He would not let a little girl get hurt." Before I could hear Kobe freak out again or Luffy gave a slightly cocky answer, I looked at the direction of Zoro and the little girl. I swear though, the cockiness rubbed off on Luffy from Ace. Anyway, the little girl showed him something and I noticed they were rice balls. That's nice of her. He's not so bad," Zoro said. "I don't want it, go away," and there it goes, she said. "But I made them myself and you haven't eaten in days." He glared at her and yelled, "I don't want it, little girl, now scram." I blinked in slight shock. Well, that was mean. He has fewer manners than me and Luffy combined. Well, I guess he has a reason. If I didn't eat for day, I'd be mad or grumpy too. I heard an annoying voice say loudly filled with arrogance, "Now, Zoro, stop bullying little kids." I looked to see a boy with ugly blonde hair shaped like an onion. a rich person suit on and just had a look that made me want to punch his lights out. Behind him he had two Nobody Marys flanking him. Although every Marine is a nobody to me. He laughed at Zoro the little girl and said, "If you don't stop, I'll tell my daddy." I blinked for the second time today. Really? So when the going gets tough, he runs to his father. Wonderful, a daddy's boy to deal with. He snatched a rice ball from the little girl and took a bite, ignoring the little girl's I could jump over and yell at him. He spit it on the floor and said in a mean voice for a kid her age, "That's disgusting. They're full of sugar, not salt. Wouldn't you do that, idiot?" She sniffed and I growled. I felt Luffy lay a hand on my arm. I forgo he was here. It made me feel a little better. All he is a bully. The little girl sank to her knees and said, "I worked hard on those. I thought it would taste better sweet." He made a face at her and pulled out a flyer from his jacket and said, "Anyone who helps criminals is being illegal and will executed from Captain Morgan. They would stoop so low to kill a little girl." Of course they would. They are Marines. If they try to kill her, I'm jumping in. Luffy's hand tightened around my arm. The blonde-haired guy said, "Throw the girl over the wall." The two Marines stared at him in shock and stood still. The blonde idiot grabbed one by his collar and shook him, yelling, "Are you listening to me? Throw her over the wall or I'll tell my daddy." I scowled in anger and wanted so badly to punch him in the face. One Marine went to pick her up. That's one of the reasons why I hate Marines. They always follow orders no matter how bad they are. Pirates can disobey an order or follow it if we want to. Marines are just cowards. The Marine that picked up the little girl said something even I could barely hear. Curl up into a ball. I only heard that because of my devil fruit powers. Luffy used his arms to stretch and catch her falling to the ground, but he protected her. Me and Kobe jumped down. Kobe ran to the little girl and I pulled Luffy to his feet. Kobe kept on asking the little girl if he was okay and it was starting to annoy me. I said to him. Luffy shielded her with his body. "She's fine," Kobe nodded and said to himself. "I wonder what bad thing he did." The little girl looked a little angry as she said, "He didn't do anything. I'm Rika and this is why he is stuck there. His man Big Stupid Wolf attacked me in my mommy's place and Zoro killed him and saved my life. Then that meanie Helmeppo said if he can last a month on there, he could leave. But he is being not fair. He kicks and punches him every day. Wow, so isn't that bad after all? Luffy will want him on out crew now." Luffy jumped over the wall and I decided to let him go alone. The Zoro guy was tied up anyway and Luffy could protect himself. I yawned and flopped to the ground lazily next to Rika. I lay on my back with my hands clasped behind my head. Kobe said in a worried voice, "You're going to let Luffy go by himself with that demon?" I looked at him with one eye open and said, "Yeah, he will be fine." I feel him stare at me with disbelief when I closed my eyes and let out a relaxing breath. I fell asleep, snoring lightly. Monkey D. Luffy. I finished talking to Zoro and decided he will join my crew. I jumped over the wall and saw Kobe and Rika, the little girl. Aki was sleeping with her hands behind her head. "Ah, I wish I could sleep. She needs to get up, so we can get our crewmate Zoro." I cumped on her and she gave a yell. Her eyes shot open and she glared at me. She said, "Luffy, what is wrong with you?" I was confused. "All I did was wake her up," I said. "Nothing, all I did was wake you up." She pushed me off with a punch and sat up, rubbing her stomach. "Wait, did I hurt her, Ops?" I said. "Sorry, Aki," she sighed and said. "The onion-haired jerk is an ass," Kobe yelled out. "Aki-san, watch what you say about him and you can't curse around kids." She shrugged and I wondered what was so bad about it. I held my hand to Aki and she stood up. We followed Rika to her family restaurant. Grady Aki. Before we got into Rika's house, restaurant thing, we heard noises outside. I rubbed my stomach. Damn it, Luffy. Did he have to jump on me? Wait, of course he did. He's Luffy. Anyway, we heard that jerk's voice, Helmeppo say. "Give that and you can keep the check." I'm bored. I think I'll just execute Zoro in 3 days. My eyes widened. The bastard will do what? I looked at Luffy and his face was unreadable, so he's pissed too. Kobe and Rika looked horrified and I have no doubt I looked pissed. We all walked in and Luffy punched him in the face. I grinned at the action and the blonde-haired idiot looked shocked as he fell to the ground, holding his face. He said, "You hit me, I'm telling my daddy on you." I snorted and walked slowly up to him with one of my scary grins. I then kicked him in the stomach hard and tilted me heel to leave a better impact. He screamed and held his stomach and face. "You hit me too, girl. I'll tell my daddy on you and have both of you executed," I sneered and said. "Annoying, crybaby," Luffy yelled out, and I looked to Kobe trying to hold him back. "Be a man and fight your own battles." Helmeppo and his 2 Marine bodyguards left and Kobe yelled at us. "Why do you have against the Marines?" Luffy said. "Nothing, guys like that piss me off," I answered looking out to space and said. "Something, all Marines are S." My eyes met Luffy and he looked serious for once. He smiled at me and patted my shoulder. "Of course we know all of your secrets. I know who Ace's dad is. They know my problem with Marines and Ace knows our thing with Shanks and we protect each other. I suppose I don't hate all Marines. Garp is not too bad, even if he is a nutcase." I shook my head and Luffy said. "Zori crew." I grinned at him and said. "Yup, and I'll help." Luffy patted me on the back and we left the place and headed toward the Marine headquarters. We ended up at the wall again and I and Luffy climbed over. We walked over to Zoro, who was lying there on the wooden cross. Zoro glared at us and asked, "Who is she?" Luffy answered with a blinding grin. "My friend Aki, she'll be on my crew with us," Zoro answered him. "I told you I'm not going to join a pirate crew," Luffy shrugged and said. "But I already decided you're going to be on my crew," Zoro yelled, pissed off. "You can't just decide things for yourself." I laughed loudly at this and introduced myself properly. "Well, Mr. Roanoa Zoro, I'm Grey Diaki. Nice to meet y'all and welcome to the crew." He glared at me and I grinned back. He said, "I could get out if I had my swords," Luffy asked. "Where are they?" Zoro said back. "The bastard's son has them," Luffy said. "Fine, then I'll go get them." He ran in the other direction and I felt myself facepalm. "He's going the wrong way," Zoro yelled. "You're going the wrong way." Luffy swung around and made his arm stretch to make himself go faster. I grinned at the shocked face of Zoro. Kobe hopped over and tried to pull the rope off of Zoro's arm. I looked around because he seemed to get. I looked for Marines and heard a loud smashing sound. Zoro and Kobe looked around and I said, "That's Luffy." They looked at me with blank faces. I laughed. "The Marines will come soon. I have to get ready, not that it will be hard, but I have Zoro tied up and weak Kobe to defend. Luffy will be fine against these Marines." The Marines showed up and I cursed. I can't deflect bullet. Since my hearing and sight is good, I can dodge, but the 2 behind me will get hurt. Zoro looked pissed and freaked out. He must have found out what they were going to do to him. I braced myself for the pain and they shoot, but I felt nothing. I looked to see a red vest and grinned when I realized it was Luffy. He spread his arms wide and they went back to the Marines and they panicked. I smacked Luffy on the back and said, "Great timing, Luffy." He turned to grin at me and waved Zoro his swords. He said, "I don't know which one is yours, so I grabbed them all," Zoro said. "They're all mine. I do the 3 sword style, interesting." I looked to see him still in the ropes. "What?" I rolled my eyes and made my claws go out 6 inches and sliced the ropes on his arms and torso. They stared at me and I made my nails shrink back to normal. I heard the Marines made some noises, I think in horror, but I'm not sure. The captain guy was there and he yelled, "If bullets won't work, attack him with swords." Zoro looked at me and I pushed Kobe out of the way as Zoro sprung with his swords out, blocking a bunch of their swords with his own. They looked scared and were crying like little babies whining about how strong they were. I laughed to myself. "Marines are cowardly babies," Zoro said. "I'm attacked Marines, so I guess I'm stuck with you being a pirate, but I will have my dream, to be the best swordsman. If you try stop me, I'll kill you." Luffy smiled at him with a nod and said, "No problem, I wouldn't accept anything else for the king of the pirates." The Marines were freaking out saying he escaped and Captain Morgan yelled, "If you don't fight, shoot yourself." I blinked as they did as he ordered. Luffy attacked him and punched his axe hand and it broke. He then started beating him up and I noticed it when the idiot Helmeppo yelled, "Stop right now, I have a hostage." I looked at him and saw him pointing a gun at Kobe's head. I narrowed my eyes and looked at Luffy. He said, "Gum gum pistol." He punched Helmeppo in the face and he flew back. I grinned and saw Morgan about to attack Luffy, but Zoro got him from behind and he fell. Yay, we won, too bad I really didn't get to fight. The Marines threw their hats up in the air and cheered. We were about to leave, but Zoro collapsed. I ran toward him and knelt down. I shook his shoulder as Luffy and Kobe panicked. I asked him, "What happened, Zoro?" He just grunted and said, "I'm hungry, that's all." I laughed. He sounded like Luffy for a second there. I and Luffy helped him move along since Kobe was too weak. Soon we ended up at Rika's restaurant and we started eating a ton of food. Zoro finished eating after a while and me and Luffy kept eating. Zoro said with a tone of shock, "How can you both keep eating?" Luffy laughed and said, "Huh. You're just a lightweight." I shrugged and said after swallowing and taking a drink, "My devil fruit needs energy so I have to eat to keep my strength up." He asked me, "What is your devil fruit power anyway?" I grinned at the question and said, Inu no mi. I get the powers of a strong dog or a normal wolf. Bigger strength, animal senses and things like that. You saw what I did with my nails earlier." Luffy slapped me on the back without stopping eating. I finished and leaned back full. Zoro asked, "I'm sure you guys have a big crew," Luffy asked. "What?" Zoro said. "Well, you said you're gathering a crew so I guessed you have one waiting." I snorted, "Not even close." Luffy just grinned and shook his head and said, "Nope. Just you, me and Aki." Kobe looked at us and asked, "So what are you guys going to do now?" Luffy exclaimed. "Go to the Grand Line." I nodded, "Though I think we need a better boat. From what I've heard of the Grand Line, we need to be protected from stuff like that." Shanks talked about the Grand Line while he was here, the one day Luffy was not there. I chuckled at the thought. I looked over and realized I missed something when I heard Kobe asked, "We're friends, right Luffy?" Aki. Luffy gave him a thumbs up and I said, "Yeah, Kobe. Even if you are going to be a damned Marine, we'll be friends." He smiled brightly at me. I can't seem to hate the kid, even if he was annoying. The doors then burst open and I saw Marines standing there, in attack mode. I grinned at Zoro and asked, "You in the mood to fight, Zoro?" He chuckled and patted me on the head, saying, "Sure, if we have to. I can see you want to." I looked at Luffy to see what he would do. The Marine said, "We thank you for freeing the town and helping us by defeating Morgan, but since you're pirates we have to ask you to leave. We will do you a favor by not reporting you." The villagers started complaining, but I shrugged. "It's not like we were planning on staying forever," Luffy said. "Okay, let's go." Me, Zoro and Luffy got up and were ready to leave and almost out the door when I heard the Marines ask Kobe, "Are you with them three?" Kobe started stuttering and then Luffy came over and said, "You'll never believe what he's been doing for the last 2 years. He was with this fat lady named Alvida and this lady was huge." He scared his arms to show what he meant and I know his description was right. I smirked to myself once I realized what he was doing. Clever little rubber boy. He continued, "And he was the cabin boy." Kobe punched him in the face. I smiled to myself, popping my goggles over my eyes. Luffy punched him back over and over again and I laughed out loud this time with a grin and I called out deciding I wanted to help. "Good job, Captain." Zoro stopped him, telling him he did enough and to let him fall to the floor. The lead Marine yelled at us, "Stop it and get out of here. We can tell you're not friends with you." All of us walked out the door and I laughed a lot as Zoro said to Luffy, "Great act you showed there. I'll not be surprised if they don't fall for it." Luffy just grinned and we got into our small boat. Though Zoro seemed to glare at it a little. I must have spaced out a bit when they talked about the boat. Before we left we heard a shout. I looked to see Kobe giving his salute. I blinked and then grinned, waving at him. He yelled, "Luffy, I owe you a lot for helping me. I'll never forget this." I smiled. Luffy was always helping people, one way or another. The next thing I know the Marines were all saluting us and I blinked surprised and pouted and looed to see the Marines doing something good. It was childish, but I don't care. First heard the Marine guy bark out, "Now men, no food for." I blocked them out and plaid on the ship for, suddenly tired and worn out. I haven't been around Marines for that long, except for Garp on Dawn Island, but I don't count him. He's just a crazy old man to me with a hell of a punch. I put my goggles on top of my forehead and sighed. I felt a foot poke me and glared slightly at Zoro and asked, "What?" He said in a light voice. "You really hate Marines, don't you?" I frowned and crossed my arms over my chest. I asked in an annoying voice, "What do ya mean?" He rolled his eyes and said, "An idiot could tell, what's with you and Marines anyway?" I felt my mood darken and I know my face did too, I said. "Nothing to do with you. I didn't ask why you want to be the greatest swordsman, and everything has a story behind it. Especially a dream." He patted me on the head again and I wondered why he kept on doing that, and he asked, "Does Luffy know?" I laughed. "Of course he does. He's my brother." He looked between us and Luffy said, popping out of nowhere, "We knew each other since we're kids 10 years ago." He left it at that and I said, "Well, I'm tired, good night." Zoro said, "It's the morning." I stuck my tongue out and curled up on the boat and fell asleep with my goggles around my neck. I cursed Zoro when I woke up later because I hate my dream on why I developed a hatred for Marines, and this being another thing that helped me be a pirate other than Shanks and his crew's influence. Grey Diaki dream. I was 5 years old then and my life was great. I was innocent and I lived in a different place than Dawn Island in Fuchsia Village. I had a mother and father and I was happy. All I knew then was that they used to be pirates on the same crew and then hate me. We were in a remote place and that was the reason I later found out I knew them longer than I did. My father was a fisherman down by the docks and my mother usually stayed home with me or went to the village and told me to stay home and don't leave unless mama or papa came by. Then one day when the whole family was home eating dinner, salmon and rice, a bang came from where the front door was and I looked to see a bunch of Marines running in. I gasped in shock and fell off my chair and scooted to the corner with my hands over my head, the only protection I knew. My parents jumped off their chairs and started fighting quickly. Then some that was in fancy clothing with some cape, coat on their shoulders came in and saw me. I gasped and remembered trembling. My mother jumped in front of me and before my father could get her or my mother could defend myself, the man I knew later as an admiral stabbed my mother in the stomach with a sword so far in the tip just touched my stomach. I remembered, gasped and yelling out, "Mama, no!" She smiled at me and I had all her blood on me. She dropped next to me and my father had the most outraged expression on his face. I cowered at the look, even if it was not toward me, as he started killing Marines left and right. All the Marines cornered him and another Marine with a red suit with weird prints on it and a white cape with gold things on the sides killed him and all the Marines thrust about 5 swords in him. I cried out in shock and ran from the house. I remembering running and having some guy capture me and I was scared. He was a prate. Well, late I found out he didn't kidnap me and was a friend of my parents, and this person was red-haired Shanks. They took me with them and when we landed in Fuchsia Village, they decided it was peaceful enough to let me live there, and that is how I met my best friend and brother Monkey D. Luffy. I was with them for 2 years later until I turned 7. Back to the present, I woke up with a gasp and was about fly off the boat in the ocean where I can't swim. But Zoro grabbed the back of my shirt and I flew back in the bore. Luffy looked at me worried and I scowled. "At the dream?" he asked. Again, I nodded and looked at Zoro and said with a forced grin. For the next couple of days I and Luffy complained about food, but he did it more. Zoro was hungry too and was getting mad at us. He even kicked me. I yelped at that one and kicked him back. Luffy just laughed. Then Luffy saw a bird in the sky and I grinned at him. He nodded and told Zoro, "I'm going to get it for food." I frowned when he stretched his arms to the sky and asked Zoro, "How are we going to cook it?" He scowled, but yelled in shock when the bird took Luffy in his beak by his head and flew away. My eyes flew almost out of my head. "What? Damn it, Luffy!" We sped out to sea and chased toward the bird. Zoro was speeding like crazy and I sat next to him with my legs crossed and goggles back over my eyes, wanting to get Luffy back. Last chapter. How are we going to cook it? He scowled, but yelled in shock when the bird took Luffy in his beak by his head and flew away. My eyes flew almost out of my head. "What? Damn it, Luffy!" We sped out to sea and chased toward the bird. Zoro was speeding like crazy and I sat next to him with my legs crossed and goggles back over my eyes, wanting to get Luffy back. We were going so fast that the current of the ocean was going fast and I looked around while Zoro looked up where the bird was. I saw 3 guys in the water yelling for help and I said to Zoro, "3 guys up ahead, waterlogged." He looked over and sighed when he saw them. They were still calling out to us and Zoro yelled at them, "You'll have to jump in." "I can't stop." They jumped in and all 3 of them were across from us. I yelled, "You're crazy," I said with a laugh. "They actually made it." Zoro gave a chuckle and one guy said, "We're the great buggy pirates, give us your boat and get off," I sighed. "We need to find Luffy. But deal with these people." The three men dubbed buggy pirates tried to look scary, but me and Zoro quickly beat them up. I looked at the work we did and I laughed a bit awkwardly to myself. They had scratch marks from when I let my nails grow out a bit for damage. Zoro stared at me and I coughed and said, "Sorry, I didn't get to fight the last time, I got carried away." He shook his head with a smirk and I wondered if he was mocking me, but my thought got broken off when I heard one of them say, "Sorry, we didn't know you were Roronoa Zoro, pirate hunter and his friend." I pouted. "I'm not a side person." "Ace would be laughing right now and Luffy would too," I said to Zoro. "How come? I'm stated as your friend. They should recognize me too." Zoro rolled his eyes and said to them with an angry glare, "Look what you did." I now lost sight of my friend. He then made them row and told them to do it fast. I asked, "Why were you in the ocean anyway? You can't sail without a boat, stupid." The guys looked angry, but looked at my hands and one exclaimed, "Some girl tricked us and took our boat making us stay in her small one and then it rained and ruined it." The guy next to him muttered, "She was hot too." I laughed amused at the whole thing. Zoro barked at them, "Row faster." They jumped and rowed really fast. Soon we ended up at an island and the buggy pirates ran out. We looked around the town we're in and saw it deserted. Zoro said, "I bet Luffy is with the buggy pirates causing trouble." I blinked and asked, "Who is this buggy person?" He looked at with disbelief for some reason and said, "Were you even listening?" I shrugged and said, "Nah, I must have spaced out." He sighed again and we walked around and saw a big pirate ship. I looked at it and saw Zoro going the other way. I asked him, "Are we still looking for the pirate ship?" He nodded, so I said, "Then why are you going in the opposite direction?" He looked behind us and looked away from me, walking toward it with a light blush in face. I snickered under my breath and heard him growl, "You are a second Luffy sometimes, you know that," I said with a nod. "Yeah, I lived with him long enough." We were almost on the pirate ship and I heard a lot of noise and yelling of, "Get her!" I winced. The noise of their yelling really loud on my sensitive ears. I said while covering them, "Yep, Luffy is there." He nodded and we quietly climbed up the boat and looked over the side. A girl with orange hair, a tight white shirt and an orange skirt was about to be attacked by 4 pirates and Luffy was in a cage tied up. I looked at Zoro and said, "You help her, I'll help Luffy." He nodded and shot of our hiding place swords ready, and while their attention was on Zoro, I went over to Luffy. He grinned when he saw me, but I shushed him when I got there. He put his hands over his mouth. I jingled the lock, but it did nothing. I frowned and took my claws out. I slashed at the bars, but made them back to normal when sparks only came. I looked and noticed they did not see me. I tried pulling the bars with my strength, but that didn't work. I looked around to see a gloved hand with blades in it stab Zoro in the back before I could do anything. My eye widened in anger. Stabbing the back is cowardly. Luffy thought so too because he yelled, "Stabbing in the back is cowardly. Loser, big nose." I looked around and saw the hand attach back to his arm and I shivered. That's creepy. Luffy said it was too and I was freaked out at how our thoughts were the same. The crew jaws dropped along with this guy that looked to be in charge. I asked, "Who the hell are you?" Zoro yelled, "That's Buggy, stupid. Don't you ever pay attention?" I yelled back. "Only to important people." The Buggy guy said, "You dare insult me?" I waved him off and said, "Shut up, big nose. I'm having a conversation here." Luffy started laughing and Zoro face palmed, while the crew and Buggy had their jaws dropped to the ground. Luffy told us, "Leave." I looked at him. I saw his grin and realized we were good. I looked at the cannon and saw it lit. My eyes widened and with a yelp, I backed away. Zoro went under it and I looked worried, with his injury and all. But he flipped it over and it blew up at the buggy pirates. Zoro went to pick up Luffy's cage and I glared at him. I grabbed it and lifted it by the bars over my head. I ignored his pissed off look and jumped off the boat. I heard Zoro behind me and I took off. We ended up in the middle of the place and I dropped Luffy, stretching my arms. Damn, he's heavy. Zoro flopped to the ground and I stared at his wound and he noticed my look. He rolled his eyes and looked away from me. Before I could say anything, I heard Luffy say, "Hey, look, a dog." I looked at Luffy and saw a small white dog not moving in one place standing in front of a building. Luffy asked. Is he dead? I shrugged and Zoro said in a bored voice. Why does it matter? I glared at him. Since eating the Inu no Emi I had a weird connection with dogs. I can't talk to them or anything like that, but I have an empathy with them. This one let off a weird protective aura. I heard steps and looked up to see that orange-haired girl from before. I stiffened. Luffy told me who and what that orange-haired girl did. Even I'm not that naive and she tricked him for her own good. She tossed a key on the ground and said, "Here, this is what you get for saving me." Before he could pick it up, the dog ate it. My eyes widened while Luffy strangled the dog. I pulled at his arms and a voice yelled at us. Hey, you stop. Leave Cho alone. I and Luffy stopped what we were doing and looked toward the voice. It was a weird old guy with a head that looked like a poodle. Luffy asked, "Who are you?" The old guy answered, "The mayor of this town, Boodle." I snickered at the name and felt the girl kick me. Ow, that hurt. I looked at her and asked, "Who are you anyway?" She glared at me, but said, "Nami, you pirate." I grinned. "Thanks for the compliment." Her eyes widened in anger. "How is that a compliment?" I said. "Pirates are awesome. I know a couple of great ones, not including myself of course." I heard Zoro snort and Luffy laugh. The mayor's attention was on Zoro and he said, "You're hurt, let me help you in my home." Zoro stood up and said, "I'm good, I just need a nap." He walked off with the mayor to a house and the three of us were here alone. I asked Luffy, "So what's with the orange-haired girl?" She glared at me, but Luffy said, "She our new navigator." I nodded. "I guess I'll deal with her," I said. Aye, Captain." The girl yelled. "I'm not on your crew." I stared at her with a smirk. "Keep saying that. Luffy will get you to join if he really wants to." Zshe glared more and Boodle the mayor came back. I laughed a little. "Boodle the poodle." I laughed loudly. Luffy looks at me and I whispered while kneeling down, "Boodle the poodle." He laughed too and Nami stood there looking confused. The mayor came back and soon enough we heard a roar. The mayor panicked saying something and Luffy was still trying to get out of the cage. I stood next to Luffy. A couple of seconds later, a big tiger thing came with some guy that had a square face, white covering around his head with ears. Some more of the stuff around his upper body and yellow scarf and blue pants, he said. "I'm Moji, the beast trainer and my partner Richie." I raised an eyebrow as Luffy asked, "What is up with the costume?" The Moji guy looked insulted as he said, "This is my real hair." I and Luffy said at the same time, "Now that's just weird." He looked angry as he yelled, "Hey, shut up, I'm an animal trainer. Watch this." He went by Cho and like Luffy he bit him, but on the arm. He shook him off with a yell and said, "Forget the dumb dog." He looked at us and Luffy asked, "Can you tame Aki? She's part dog?" I face-palmed and kicked his cage and yelled with a red face, "Shut up Luffy." He grinned at me and Moji said, "Don't ignore me. Get them Richie." He pounced and I jumped away on all fours a few feet away and stood up. Luffy's cage was smashed to pieces and Luffy came out grinning as he said, "Thanks for letting me out." I chuckled. "Only Luffy." The tiger thing then messed up the building behind Cho even when he started barking. I narrowed my eyes when Luffy looked angry. It was just a building. He beat up Richie and he yelled, "That was his treasure." "Oh, okay." I touched my goggles with a small smile and with quick speed punched Moji in the stomach and kicked him under the chin. He flew back and yelled as I glared at him, "Ow! Richie!" I looked and saw the dog in the dirt. I walked over to Luffy as he said to Cho, "You did a good job of protecting the store even if we didn't see it." I nodded and smiled with my teeth. My tongue at the corner of my mouth. A dog smile. More like a canine instinct I discovered. Moji and Richie ran off and I yawned. "Well, that was boring. I wanted more action." He nodded and said, "Yeah, I want some meat." I rolled my eyes. "Luffy, we'll get some later. Okay? After this is all done? Are you sure you want Nami as our navigator? She's a little iffy to me." He nodded and looked at me seriously. "Yep, Nami is our navigator like you're my best friend, protector of the crew and sister, and Zoro is my swordsman and first mate." I sighed and said, "Fine, whatever you say, Captain." Nami and Boodle showed up and Nami yelled, "You both are alive." I and Luffy nodded. Yep, she looked at the store and the depressed Cho and glared. Pirates are all the same, taking treasures from people. I should finish you two off so there will be two less pirates. I gave her a glance and then stared at Luffy, who picked up a box of dog food, and I realized it must have been a pet store or something like that. Boodle was holding her back and I smirked in their direction. Luffy said, "You can't kill us." I nodded and said, "Yeah, you don't have the will. Boodle, you can let her go." He didn't and held on. Luffy gave Cho-Cho the dog box and he left with it in his mouth. Before he left us, he put the box down and barked at us. I laughed and barked back while looking in his eyes. He picked up his box and left. Nami asked me, after she stopped struggling, "What the hell was that?" I laughed at her shocked face and said, "I ate the inu fruit. I have a lot of dog tendencies." She blinked at me and turned away, but I caught her shiver and laughed again. I could get used to her, she really was amusing. Then, a large cannonball hit a house behind us and destroyed it. I feel something had happened there and I realized it was a buggy ball. I didn't know what the bad thing was until Luffy shouted, "Ah!" Zoro was sleeping in there. I ran over and Zoro came out of the rubble and said, "That's a bad way to wake up." Luffy cheered and I sighed in relief as Zoro walked over. Though I know that wound did nothing good for him. Boodle looked pissed off as he said, "I can't take this anymore, this been going on too long." I looked at him and asked, "What y'all mean, Mayor?" He cleared his throat and I knew a huge speech would be coming, so I sat down as he said, 40 years ago, this town used to be rubble and we made it in this town. The place is deserted and Buggy the Clown ruined it and I sat around and did nothing. Everyone, even little Cho-Cho did something and I have not. I will not let this stand. I'm going to go after Buggy Pirate." It was Nami's turn to try and stop him. She yelled, "Stop it," Boodle asked. "Shouldn't I protect it?" Luffy said. "Yeah, old man." I nodded. "No matter how old you are, if something is important, you should fight for it. Unlike when I was little." I shook my head and focused on what was happening right now as Nami yelled, "Don't encourage him, it's reckless." Boodle pulled away from her and yelled back, "I know it's reckless." Nami led as she stared at him in shock. He yelled, charging forward, "I'm coming for you, Buggy the Clown." I watched him go as Zoro and Luffy laughed and I couldn't help but grin. Name glared at us. "How can you laugh at a time like this?" I said. "Don't worry, Nami, Luffy won't let the old man die." Luffy nodded. "Nope, let's go." Zoro shrugged and said, "Let's follow the captain." We went to the way Boodle went and saw him being strangled by Buggy's hand high in the air. I narrowed my eyes as Luffy made the hand let go and kind of strangled it. Buggy got his hand back and Boodle was gasping for air on the ground. He saw us and yelled, "What are you doing here?" I said I had it. "This is my battle." Before Boodle could charge again, I gave Luffy a look and he nodded with a grin. With permission, I slammed Boodle's head into a house and he was knocked unconscious on the ground. Nami gawked at me. Zoro stared and Luffy laughed. I looked at Boodle and crinkled. "I guess I did that to hard," Nami yelled. "Why do you do that?" Luffy answered for me. "He would have gotten in the way." Zoro nodded. "It makes sense, that way he doesn't die," Name argued. "You could have done it in a nicer way," I pouted and said. "What fun would that be?" She growled at me and I was shocked she could make such a sound. I heard Buggy yell, "Buggy ball." I looked at Luffy in panic and he stood in front of us and yelled, "Gum gum." Rubber ball. He made himself into a ball and bounced the cannonball to them. There was a big cloud of smoke and I glared when I saw him using his crew to saw himself. I knew the other three had the same reaction. Nami said, "Using your own crew to save yourself. That's disgusting." I couldn't agree more. Truly disgusting. Then Luffy cupped his hands over his mouth and yelled, "Here goes. Hey big nose." My eyes widened and then I burst out laughing, holding out my stomach. Luffy even knows what he's doing. His crew was flipping out with their jaws on the floor and Nami was holding her with a shocked expression. Zoro was calm and I was still laughing. Nami said, "That's the worst thing you could say." Luffy looked smug and Buggy said, "You flashy idiot." I still had a grin on my face even if I was done laughing. I asked Zoro, "Do you think his nose is real?" Zoro said, "I don't know, maybe." I frowned. "But that's like impossible. It's so big, I bet it comes off." Zoro shrugged. Buggy yelled, "Shut up, you idiots." Now, that was not nice. Then this guy was talking to him about disrespect or something like that. He had black hair with a greenish tint and some yellow strips and checkered scarf on his neck and was riding a bike with one wheel and a sword in one hand. He was about to fight Luffy, but Zoro stepped up and said, "Since he has a sword, I'll fight him." I nodded and moved till I was next to Nami and Luffy instead. Buggy said, "Fine, fight him Kabaji." The guy now named Kabaji looked at Zoro and said, "Rorinoa Zoro, I'll fight you." Then he kicked him in the wound given by Buggy earlier and a deep growl slipped out of my mouth, Nami said. He kicked him right in the injury. Luffy frowned as he said, "Yeah, come on, get up Zoro." I silently cheered Zoro on as he was on his knees. Kabaji laughed at him. Ice is Zoro's fight and Luffy didn't do anything to help him. Zoro was on his feet again and Kabaji wheeled till he was away from him, but in front. He threw these spinning tops, but they didn't touch Zoro. I heard Buggy yell, "You get him Kabaji. I'll hold him." Luffy stepped on his hand that popped off his wrist. Zoro then got ready to fight as he took out his 3 swords. Nami ran off saying she didn't want to be here and she was going to get treasure. We let her go and I asked, "Do you want me to go after her to make sure?" He nodded with a shrug. I quietly walked behind her, but so she didn't see me. I had no doubt she would be pissed if she saw me. She walked into this house, which winded up to be a place where the treasure was. She was grinning at the stuff and some weird guy came out with little sticks on his head and a bottle in his hands. His eyes were a little dazed and I knew he was drunk. I knew this because you hang around Shanks about as long as a year and then some, you'll know what drunk looks like, the guy said. "If anyone if found, I have to get you according to Buggy," Nami screamed and I jumped in my hiding space. "Did something happen?" She was holding her chest as the guy said. "Huh, what happened to you?" she said in a slightly high pitch that hurt my ears. "My chest, it hurts." He looked down and got even more and dazed and then she smacked him on the head and he was knocked out. I snorted, a dirty trick, but hey it works. She took something from him and opened the chest on top and I saw a rolled up piece of paper inside and she grabbed it. She opened it and said in a happy voice, "Yes, the map to the Grand Line." I decided I was bored at Juicy hiding so I came out and said, "Really, that's great navigator." She seemed to freeze and turned around with a look of shock and for some reason fear. I guess she thought I was a Buggy pirate hidden or something. She then glared and smacked me with her pole in the head. I yelped and held my head, where I knew a bump was forming. It didn't knock me out like it should have because of my resistance to pain, but it still hurt. I yelled. "What was that for?" she said. "You snuck up on me. Why aren't you out there?" I was a bit annoyed she hit me so I did the mature thing. I shook my tongue out and said, "I don't have to tell you, navigator." She bared her teeth at me and said, "I'm not your navigator." I nodded. "Officially, you're Luffy's." She glared at me and started collecting money in a bag and had a couple by the time she was done. I was leaning against the wall and grabbed 2 of them easily with only a little bit of difficulty. She tried to take it from me at the same time of having a shocked look. I rolled my eyes. "Don't worry, I'm not taking it. I'm just helping you carry it. Since we're gonna be on the same boat, I wouldn't want the only girl to hate me. Not that I'm not used to it. I want to be friends." She looked at me more surprised than when she saw my strength. I walked out and she had no choice but to follow me. We were outside and I saw Buggy use his hand to stab through Luffy's hat with 3 knives and bring it to himself. I glared and dropped the bags and fixed the goggles over my eyes, touching them fondly. He messed with Shanks' hat and Luffy's treasure. He has to pay. Luffy fell to the floor with a torn and shocked look on his face. He ruined it. I ignored Nami's scolding about being careful with her treasure and glared with a no doubt dark look on my face as Buggy said, "This is your treasure? This is not treasure. It has not value. Jewels and rubies are treasure. Grow up, little boy." I noticed a dark look on Luffy's face as he yelled, "Shut up." When Shanks gave me that I made a promise, Buggy looked shocked as he yelled, "What, are you saying this used to be Shank, SHAT? He threw it down to the ground and that made me grit my teeth," Buggy said. "No wonder it looked so familiar. He always wore it when I knew him." Luffy gasped and I was also shocked. Buggy knew Shanks? And he acted all familiar with him too? I never heard of a Buggy from Shanks, though he did describe something like him once. He asked, "You and Shanks were a part of the same pirate crew?" Buggy said. "Yeah, when we were still pirates in training. We were fellow comrades. That damn detestable bastard," To fuel me and Luffy's rage even more, he stepped on the hat. Luffy's face was pissed as he bared his teeth and yelled. Shanks is a much better man than you'll ever be. You don't have the right to call him comrade and don't you ever badmouth him again. I nodded, but decided not to say anything even if I wanted to. I would still beat down the person who ever badmouthed Shanks, even after all these years. Buggy laughed and said. Time for my chop chop big escape. His head flew off his shoulders as Luffy kicked him in the stomach and he fell over. Luffy yelled. I don't want you to ever mention Shanks's name again, you bastard. Buggy coughed and held his chin as he said lowly, still coughing. I can say whatever the hell I want about Shanks. Luffy got on him and started pulling on his cheeks and I was tensed almost in a crouch getting ready to fight if I had to and forgetting about Nami, so into the fight. Luffy yelled. Tell me what happened between you and Shanks and where can I find him now? He got off him and I stood up and walked over until I was right next to him messed up hat. I picked it carefully, so I did not ruin it further. He yelled at him. You dared tear up my treasured straw hat. He looked surprised to see me, but I did was scowl while looking at the hat. Is it even fixable? I don't know how. It sounds like a girly thing to know. I placed it on my head. I would protect it since it was important to Luffy, Buggy said. Do you really want to know? He's the one person that I loathe. I'll curse his name for the rest of my life. As long as there is breath in my body, Shanks, I will never forgive you. I growled and could not control myself. Shut up, you shitty bastard. Don't you dare insult Shanks. The man saved me and Luffy's life and gave us both a treasure to savior. He also helped me and Luffy have the will to become a pirate. He glared at me. Shut up, girl, I yelled back as Luffy watched silently. No, I won't let someone ever insult Shanks as I stand by. People like you make me so angry. He just glared at me and I said. But I won't fight you this time. You're Luffy's, so he gets to fight you. But next time I see you, you're dead meat? Luffy nodded at me with a happy-ish look on his face. He said, facing us. In all my life, I've never been as mad at someone as him. That bastard Shanks stole countless riches from me. I don't know how you two are connected, but I can say whatever I want about him. I earned that. All three of us hand a face-off and Buggy growled. He then told us his story about how he and Shanks were on the same ship, but then when he found a treasure map, Shanks somehow made him eat a devil fruit he was planning to sell, and when he tried to go on the sea, Shanks saved his life. Why would he be mad at him then? Because of Shanks he is alive? Dumb clown. Buggy looked pissed at the end of the story and Luffy asked confused. So you're saying Shanks saved your life? Buggy angrily pointed at us and yelled. No, that's not the point I'm trying to get across, he continued. Because of what he did to me I was unable to swim and therefore was unable to get my sunken treasure. I then had a revelation. If I can't go underwater I'll get all the treasure on dry land. Using my brand new chop chop powers. His top half lifted in the air and went above us with swords in his hands, he said. I kill all those who tried to steal from me. My hard-earned treasure. Get back here, you thief. I heard a gasp and glared when I saw his top half try to get Nami, who had bags in his hands. She seems like a kind of friend to me and no one is allowed to hurt my friends. Name tried running as she yelled. Damn it, he spotted me, Buggy yelled. You don't stand a chance of escaping me. His was chasing after her to make sure she didn't get stabbed to death and then he gave the most filled face and I turned back to Luffy and found out why. Luffy kicked him in the balls. I winced. Even if I'm a girl, I think I felt that from here. I heard a band and turned back around only to see Buggy's top half fall to the ground groaning with tears in his eyes as he said. Ow, my balls, my balls. That was a cheap shot. All Luffy did was grin at him and say. Don't run away, we're not done. I laughed and said to Luffy. I think you killed him. He laughed at what I said and said himself. Nah, he'll be fine. I shrugged. If he says so. Luffy pointed at Nami and said. You better drop that treasure and get out of here, Nami. He'll come after you again. I snorted, shaking my head. From what I got to know about her, she'd never give up money, even on her own life on the line. She proved me right by yelling back at Luffy. No, drop the money and go. No way. Why should I leave my treasure behind? I blinked, tilting my head to the side confused and asked. To live another day, there are other things more important than money, she said. No way, this is my money and I got it fair and square, Buggy asked with a growl lifting his head up. Did you just call it your treasure? Nami stood over him and yelled. That's right, and I just stole from an annoying one. So that makes this my treasure now, and that makes it my treasure now. Understand? She finished with pointed her fist at him. Luffy looked like he realized something as he said, "Ah, that makes sense." Then he put his fist in his palm and I said, "Not really, Luffy. She a thief, but our thief." He nodded. Buggy exploded in anger and yelled, "That's nonsense. Just because you steal it from me does not make it yours. You dirty sneaky thief." "Well, that was a bit harsh," he yelled out. "Honestly, what did your parents teach you?" She shook her head. "A criminal trying to lecture another criminal. Ridiculous," he yelled. "What?" I yawned. All this talking was getting annoying. "Can we just beat this guy already, and we should also get him for hurting Zoro too? I almost forgot about that," she said. "The day I take a lesson from you is the day I stop being a thief." Then to add insult to injury, she stuck her tongue out at him and I started laughing. Little girl like her being rude to a pirate. But I guess me or Luffy can't talk when that is concerned. He yelled. "Here comes, chop chop." All his body parts except for his head and torso was all over the place and Luffy exclaimed, "They're all over the place." I noticed his foot running away and I grabbed one giving to Luffy as he pulled out of the shoe and tickled and then pulled the skin on it. He then slammed it on the ground and Nami hit Buggy with the bag of treasure and he flew in the air. I grinned and yelled, "Cool, our navigator can fight." Nami glared at me, which Luffy grinned as wide as me and looked to be thinking the same. Buggy then grabbed the treasure and they had a tug-of-war with it. They both looked to be money hungry. He went to stab her and before I can run over, Luffy did and punching him in the face and said while running, "I said you weren't done with me yet." The bag then ripped and the gold and pearls went everywhere. Buggy's pieces were all over the place. "Now that you think about it, that kind of gross," Nami said. Thanks," Luffy said. "No problem, at least she is not yelling anymore," they said at the same time. "The map, the treasure, oh, yeah, we need the map to the Grand Line to get there." Buggy was floating in the air, his captain's coat flying behind him. He yelled, "How dare you Flashy do that to me? Gum Gum, I'm really sick of his talk." Nami ran off and I decided she was fine since his attention was on me and Luffy. I saw him gather up his pieces and was shocked when there was a mini version of him and I heard rope. I grinned when I saw Nami on top of his tied up body parts. I said, "Hey, you did it." She actually sent me a smile in return and then grinned at Buggy and asked, "Looking for these, Buggy?" I laughed. "What a smartass," Buggy yelled, pissed off. My parts, me and Luffy laughed at his reaction and Luffy yelled, "Alright." Luffy let his arms reach really far back and then shot them at him yelling with his palms facing toward him. "Gum Gum, bazooka." Buggy flew back in the air and I smirked. "Yeah, we beat the damn clown." Luffy threw his arms up in the air and yelled, "I win." I nodded and slapped Luffy on the shoulder and he turned to grin at me and I said, "It looks like you had fun." He nodded and said, "Too bad you didn't get him." I sighed and said, "Yeah, next fight I get to fight no matter what." He grinned in response. I took off the hat. It was a weird weight on my head, since I don't wear hats and I only felt the weight on eyes and forehead. I gave the hat to Luffy and he looked at it sadly. Nami said, "Sorry, your hat got torn up." Luffy laughed and put it on his head and said, "Don't worry, I can still put it on. I still got Buggy, so I satisfied," I heard Nami say. "When I have time I can fix it for you." I looked at her hopefully. "Can she really do it?" Luffy asked. "What's that?" I looked at her as she turned away and said, Forget it. I put it in 2 bags, so help me carry half of it. It's too heavy for me," Luffy said. "Yeah, that sure is a lot," I said. "Yeah, it is. I carried it over," she said. "He had quality treasure when he saw it. I bet I can sell it for 10 million berries, okay? Then." She seems a bit obsessed with money. She held out a rolled piece of paper and my eyes widened when I recognized it as the chart to the Grand Line, she said. "It's the chart to the Grand Line." Luffy jumped forward and asked. "You're giving it to me," she said, turning her head away. "It's because you saved my life." He took it from her and said, "Thanks, Nami." A map from the Grand Line. "Hooray." He turned toward her and asked, "Does this mean you will join me in my pirate crew?" I chuckled. I was waiting for him to say that. "I wonder where Zoro is? Is he still napping in the street?" she said with her hands on her hips. "I told you I'll never join a pirate crew," I smiled and said. You just wait, Nami, you will. She glared at me and asked. Stop eyeing that. Do you want me to smack you in the head again? My eyes widened as I covered my head and whined. But that hurt, she yelled. Good, she then asked confused. When I hit you and you didn't pass out, or the way you held those bags, what are you? I smirked at her and said. I ate the inu no mi. I told you before, stupid, she glared and yelled. Shut up, I didn't ask how you got that way. I shrugged and looked at Luffy. Luffy looked happy at our conversation, and when she saw his look, she said. Fine, hanging out with all of you seems profitable enough. But know one thing. I'm only joining you because it's in my interest. Luffy grinned widely and said. Sure, I smiled to myself. Finally. We walked back to where the fight started and saw Zoro sleeping and snoring on his stomach with his swords around him. Luffy kept on calling him, so I yelled. Rise and shine, swordsman. He groaned and lifted his head to glare at me and then asked Luffy. Did we take care of everything? He sat on his knees as Luffy said. We have a chart of the Grand Line. He looked at Nami with a dark look and she looked shocked. I said. It's fine, Zoro, though I'm wary. I whispered the last part and then his face went blue as he held his face. Zoro said. I'm not sure about this, Nami said. Of course, there is something with the three of you. Me and Luffy both spoke up. Hey, what did I do? She looked mad and yelled. Are you kidding me? You the worst of them all. Your weird devil fruits and all. Anyways, let's go help the mayor. Luffy looked evere at Boodle on the ground and said. Oh yeah, I guess we should wake the old guy up now that it's over, I heard a voice say. Hey you there, you're not residents of this village. I looked to see a bunch of people in a crowd and wondered here. I thought the place was deserted. Luffy answered them. Nope, who are you? A guy with a long ponytail asked. What was that cannonball we heard? It sounded like there was a battle here earlier. If you know anything, tell us. I heard Nami let out a breath as she said. Good, they're just citizens. I thought that they were more pirates. They were all calling for the mayor when he was still knocked out. Damn, how hard did I hit him? Hey, maybe he is just really weak physically, Luffy said. Aki here is the one that kicked that old man's ass. I grinned at them and heard names shocked breathe. They yelled. What? Nami said. You didn't have to tell them that. Luffy looked at her and said. But, it's true, she did it. I nodded. What's wrong with telling them what happened? It's their town after all, Nami said. Maybe you should explain to them so they don't get angry. Oh yeah, that would be smart. The crowd started growling and the guy in the center of them all said. Tell me, why did you leave our mayor in the street to die? Luffy said bluntly, so like he says everything else. We're pirates. I coughed and looked at Zoro and Nami. Maybe that was not the best thing to say. Zoro was cracking up laughing holding his wound and I looked at it worried. He should be fine until we get to the boat. I got to admit though, there and Nami's face are priceless that I had to laugh too. The guy in the crowd yelled. How dare you? Zero asked with a laugh. What now? It doesn't look like they are up for a dissuasion. Luffy grabbed Zoro's arm over his shoulder and ran away from them yelling with a large grin. Run! We did just that and beat it out of there. While we were running, Luffy said. These people are great. Look how mad at hitting the old man. We ran in an alleyway and jumped over Cho-Cho and I took a bag from Nami and easily shifted it in my right arm. She sent me a grateful look. We got to the two boars and I set Nami's treasure down next to her second one. Nami asked with a tired sigh. Why do we have to put up with this? Luffy asked. Why does it matter? We're done here anyway. Luffy looked at her boat and said. Hey, this is really cool, Nami said. Oh really? I just took it from some dumb pirates, I heard someone say. That's some mouth you got there. I looked and saw the pirates from earlier that tried to hurt us, but were too weak, I said. Hey, I remember you. They flinched away from me, they said. We were waiting for you, girlie. Stealing from us. Nami laughed nervously and I remembered that they said a little girl stole from them. I cracked up laughing as Luffy asked Nami if she knew them. I said once I stopped laugh. They should, the guy with the weird hat on said. Not sort of, we're bound by fate. If these are your friends then we get to bear the crap out of them as well. He patted Zoro on the head a couple of times and I smirked knowing he won't take it well, Zoro said. Huh, he looked up at them with a dark face. They back up scared and ran away, but for the fun of it I stuck my leg out and tripped one. He fell on his face before crawling away a bit and running after his crew mares. Nami asked me, "Was that necessary?" I nodded smugly and she hit me in the head and yelled, "Don't get cocky now." I pouted and held my head. It's like when I was younger always hitting me. I rubbed my head and pouted and then sulked more when I heard Luffy and Zoro laughing at me. Before we left and Nami was not looking, I looked at Luffy and the money. He just grinned. I put one bag on her boat, but left the second one here for the town. We all got on our separate boats and Zoro looked at Nami's sail and I noticed it was Buggy's sail. Zoro asked, "Isn't that Buggy's sail?" She said, "It was their boat. You think I should change it?" I nodded. "Yeah, so people don't get the wrong way. From what I'd seen here, he probably did something bad." I heard the old man yell at us and I looked to see him on the pier without his armor. He yelled, Thank you very much. Don't worry about it. Take care of everything." I waved at him, but I didn't know if he saw it or not. Nami yelled suddenly, "What did you do, Luffy, huh? Don't tell me you left the bag of treasure back there," Luffy said. "Nope," she realized, and I hoped he wouldn't tell her I did it. But luck was not on my side today because he said, "Aki did it." She glared at me and leaned over the boat screaming, "You did what? That ABG was worth 5 million berries, you idiot." I nodded and said, "I know, but they need it. Have you seen their town?" she yelled. "But that was my treasure, jerk. How does helping a broken town make me a jerk?" I decided to not to voice this out loud. She continued, "Why's you do that? You know how hard it took me to get that." I grinned uneasy, but she took me by surprise and dunked my head underwater and I grabbed the board to stop from falling over. I yelled, "Off, I can't swim." "Ah," she yelled back. "Yeah, that's the point." Luffy pulled me away and she dunked him too. I landed on my back and breathed heavy, spitting out water, and Zoro burst out laughing. I noticed her still trying to drown Luffy and I pulled him back. "I can't swim, neither can he. Zoro is injured," and Nami seemed too pissed to help. She went back to dunking me as Zoro continued laughed. I pushed her off as my goggles slipped off my neck and fell in the water. I yelled, "No, my treasure." Nami grabbed them, but held them away from me as I reached for them. I said, "Nami, please give them to me." She glowed. "How about you give me 5 million berries?" My eyes widened and I said, "I don't have that much, it's my treasure." She rolled her eyes and I know this was wrong, but I jumped over to her boat and tackled her to the ground and grabbed my goggles. I put them over my eyes and rolled over, off her. Zoro and Luffy were talking to each other and Nami asked angrily, "What the hell was that for?" I said, "You took my treasure, it's really important to me. I promised the person that gave me these I would make a name for myself and I don't want them taken away. Simple goggles were taken away. I wouldn't be able to complete my dream," she said, shocked. Luffy said almost the same thing about his hat. I chuckled. "Yeah, we got it from the same guy." I talked to her for a bit and then went back over to my original boat. I looked at Zoro's wound and asked, "Is it okay?" He rolled his eyes. "Yeah, I just need to rest. Don't worry." I looked away from him and said, "I'm not, I just don't need you dropping on us like dead weight." I felt his stare, but felt too embarrassed to look back at him. I UYWNED and told them, "I'm going to sleep," Zoro said. "Don't drown," I huffed while Nami and Luffy said okay. I lay down and because of talking about Shanks a lot I had a flashback of when I was younger and hung around with Shanks. Flashback: Luffy was running around outside, I think getting food, but I was not hungry. I was bored and decided to keep Makino company and it was boring since she was working. She gave me a drink, but I was still bored. I looked to see an extra sake bottle looked to be half empty and someone left it there. Shanks always went on about how good it is and I was a curious 6 years old. I quietly took the bottle and put in my lap. I opened the cap and set it on the table. I just took one sip and then felt it yanked away from and felt a punch to my head that made my head hit the table. I yelled in pain and licked my lips. It kinda burned, but it was okay I guess. My head and face were hurting and I went to glare at the person, but then saw Shanks who had the sternest look on his face I even seen on him. His crew just did whatever even if I noticed Ben watching. He said, "What are you doing?" I shrugged and rubbed the growing bump on my head. I said, "Nothing wrong, I just wanted to try it." He rolled his eyes and said, "Drinking from the sake I had. I know Makino didn't give this to you, so you didn't buy it." My face brightened. "So if I buy it could I have some?" He hit my head again and I yelped bump as he yelled. "Don't ask stupid questions," I mumbled. "Sorry." He patted me on the head which hurt from getting hit and I asked, "Shanks, can you tell me one of your adventures? No, I want to hear about someone strange you know on the sea." He raised an eyebrow, but then grinned and said, "Okay, I was once on a cruise ship with this weird gut. He looked like a clown and I always won our arguments. My eyes sparked that time around because I was younger and he was an amazing pirate in my head," he asked with a smirk. "Do you know about clown noses and how they are fake?" I nodded with wide eyes. He said, "This one was his real nose," I yelled out. "No way," he nodded and said. "Yep, he was kinda strong, but of course I was stronger." I was grinning as he told me about this guy and he even told me about his old captain, but would not tell me his came or anything I would be able to tell by. Later Luffy came and I was oppy the whole day even if my head hurt the rest of it. I woke up with a grin and Luffy looked at me. I shrugged and looked out to sea. I can't wait for our next adventure. I was getting bored as we sailed. I was never good at the whole patience thing. Zoro was lying on the boat with his arms behind his head, just relaxing. Luffy was on the head with his legs crossed and I lying down below him and staring at the sky, my legs resting on the wall of the boat. I heard Nami say, "We'll never get to the Grand Line like this," Luffy asked. "Huh?" He looked at her with an apple finished in his mouth and said, "You right, we need a whole lot of meat," I said. "And candy. People like candy." The barrel next to him was open and full of apples, he said. "Sure, and eating fruit is for the birds." I nodded in agreement. "Fruit is nice, but eating it all the time is a bore," Zoro said. "Booze too." He got hit in the face with an apple. "Nami did it and I laughed behind my hand which got me a hit in the head which I pouted at," Nami said. "You boneheads." She had another apple in her hand. Nami said in a pissed off kind of voice. "That not what I mean. The Grand Line is a dangerous place and we need more than meat, beer and sweets to survive there. Not to mention there are pirates who are also in search of One Piece and they have ships that are better than this," Luffy said. "And we don't have a crew," Nami said. "We don't have a crew, equipment or a correct ship," I said to Luffy. "But we can get all that later, right Luffy?" He grinned down at me. "Yep, we will and I'll be Pirate King." The conversation was boring so I closed my eyes and relaxed. I heard Nami call him stupid for bad planning. I looked at Nami with one eye opened and said with a small grin on my face, "If you haven't noticed, I and Luffy always do things on a whim." She rolled her eyes and grumbled under her breath, while Zoro laughed at that. "But I think he was laughing because he knew it was true," Nami said. "We'll never get there like this," Luffy said while chomping on the apple. "Yep, we need a cook and a musician to keep us entertained," Zoro asked amused. "A musician?" He started laughing and I laughed with him, Nami said in a depressed voice. "So stupid," I said. "But Nami, Luffy is right. The adventure wouldn't be fun if we are not doing anything." She face-palmed and ignored me. She should look at things more simply. Worrying too much makes life boring. Nami looked at a map I would not be able to understand and said, "There is an island south of here. We can go there. They have settlements." I lifted my head up interest. "An island? Yeah. My boredom would be gone." Luffy threw his hands in the air and yelled, "Yes. Meat at last." I laughed at him as Zoro said, "Booze as well." My eyes widened as I asked Luffy, "Do you think they have candy?" "I haven't had any since we left," he shrugged and said. "I don't know, maybe." I sat up with a large smile on my face. Nami was looking mad as she yelled, "Is that all you think about? Oh, what am I going to do with you three?" I shrugged and lay back down bored, but hit the deck. I sat up again with a yelp and held my head. Zoro and Luffy laughed at me and Nami only shook her head. "What, it's not my fault, stupid wood." Our boats finally hit shore and I jumped off, but I fell face down in the sand. I jumped up and spat sand from my mouth. I rubbed at it with my hand and ignored the three people laughing at me when I felt myself turn red. I looked around as they quieted down and Zoro said, "It's good to be on dry land again," Luffy asked. "There is a village around here somewhere, right?" "There better be or I fell into sand face first for nothing," Nami said. "Yeah, but it will be a small one though." Luffy ran to Nami and said to her excited, "Meat, meat. There must be meat then." Nami had an annoyed look, she said. "Forget about meat for a minute would y'all?" I shook my head with a grin. Like that would ever happen? Luffy forgetting about meat? Huh, never. Zoro was yawning again and I was surprised when he said while pushing his sword out of the sheath a little. Careful, someone is watching us. Luffy looked around happy and asked. What? By who? Do they have meat? I rolled my eyes. Okay, I'll even admit that's a bit too much. Zoro yelled. Look out, my eyes widened as something was hitting our feet and Luffy was jumping around. Since that seemed to work, I copied him and tried not to get touched, which wasn't hard, since I could hear it. Flags with a Jolly Roger and was black in the background went all around us and Luffy stared in amazement. Luffy started saying how cool it was and I wonder what pirates these were, if they were. I never saw the Jolly Roger anywhere. Then I heard a laugh and saw this guy with a cap, black curly hair, long nose, overalls and a bag over his shoulder say. Ha ha, I'm the great Captain Usopp and I'm the pirate that controls this land. You stand among a living legend and the greatest pirate ever lived. I'm the great Captain Usopp. I don't know whether to believe him or not too. He looks weak, but then so does Luffy and he's a good fighter and I know I don't look that much, but I'm good, if I do say so myself. I decided to just watch and want to see what happens. The Usopp guy said. Surely you know coming to this island is certain death. My army of 80,000 or super pirate soldiers would squash you like bugs, Luffy yelled. Awesome, I chuckled and looked at the rest of the crew. Nami looked on in disbelief and Zoro just stared and I grinned at everything. This was becoming very amusing, Nami yelled. Do you expect us to believe that? I looked at Nami with a frown and said whining. Nami, did you have to say that? That was the most fun I had since we were on the boat. She rolled her eyes and Usopp held his head and yelled. She knows, that killed his cover, Nami huffed and said. Yep, well now I know. I laughed as Usopp stared freaking out again. Luffy looked at her with shock and asked. He was lying, I sighed, and people call me hard-headed, Usopp said. Okay, 80,000 is a large number, but I have many men under my control. Nami gave a little laugh and said. I guess 3. There was a high yell and 3 little boys jumped up. They ran away screaming and Usopp screamed at them. Where are you guys going? He got mad at Luffy and got a slingshot and pulled the string back with a ball in it and Luffy's face was blank. Usopp said. You will learn why they call me Proud Usopp and not Pushover Usopp. Luffy made his hat shadow his eyes and I pulled my goggles over my eyes curious to see what he was doing. He did his getting serious thing, so that's why I did mine, Usopp said. You see what I could do with this thing? It rivals a pistol. Luffy kept his hand on his hat, he said. Now that you draw you pistol, are you ready to use it? My eyes widened and I felt excited, really though using his words. Usopp looking shocked, so I continued what the next line is which I knew by heart. Gun aren't for threats, they're for actions. Are you willing to risk your life? I sent him one of scary grins I used on the last island. His face got more scared. I heard Zoro chuckle and take out his sword all the way as he said. I can assure boy, we are real pirates. Consider your next move very carefully. I stared at him while he stared freaking as I gave him the same look and I had no doubt Luffy and Zoro were doing the same. He let it go and it dropped it to the ground and he fell to his knees saying. Real pirates have a lot more punch behind their words. That's so cool. Luffy made a sound and smiled. I did too. Luffy then cracked up and I did. Man, that was fun, Luffy said. We stole that. I nodded in agreement. He looked confused and I and Luffy both said. We stole those words from red-haired Shanks, a pirate we know, Nami asked. How do they do that? Zoro said casually. I don't know, I think they have the same mind sometimes. He looked shocked at what we said and asked. You both really know red-haired Shanks? You really are pirates? No, you must be lying. You really know him, Luffy said. Yep, while I just nodded, tired of talking, Luffy said. I know your dad too. Usopp, right? My eyes widened. I knew I say. The nose should have been a dead giveaway. I guess I was not paying attention. He fell down and hit his face on the rock he was standing on and was on the ground in front of us, he said. You're right, my old man's name is Usopp. But how did you? He sulked and let out a breath. How in the world do you know him? Without answering his question, Luffy was hungry and I was a little bit too. Usopp took us all to a food place called Meshi. We walked in and sat at a table. We ordered and stared eating. I had stacks and stacks of dango in front of me with Pocky on the sides. I know, not really healthy, but I love candy. Nami looked at me. Is that healthy? I shrugged and continued eating when I heard Luffy take a big bit of meat from a bone. I tried to take food from Luffy, but got my hand slapped. I looked at him and his eyes were narrowed. Aki. My meat, no touching, I grinned with a shrug and said. Had to try, but then kept eating my own food. I felt the rest of their stares, Usopp said. This sure is good, Luffy said with his mouth full. We knew your dad when we were kids. He looked at Luffy and asked. Does my old man really know Shanks? Luffy said. Yeah, when I knew him he was on Shanks's crew, so they probably good friends. I nodded. I think he was one of the ones he was close to along with Ben and Rue, Usopp exclaimed. I can't believe it, my old man sailing the seas with famous pirates, Luffy said. I haven't seen him in a while, but he's still probably with Shanks and he was a heck of a sharp shooter. He stared at the apple and I suddenly got a memory from a while ago. Me and Luffy were hanging around and saw Usopp shoot an apple on a crate from far away. Luffy grinned amazed and my eyes shinned when I saw it. We were sitting in a bar with him and he was drinking. Then he pulled Luffy in a headlock and stared, chopping him on the head, and Luffy tried to get loose. I was laughing at him as he said, I have a son your age named Usopp. Luffy pushed him AWAU and yelled. I heard you tell me about him 100 times, I nodded. He's right Yasop, you do? He asked. 100, he put the mug over Luffy's head and hit mine and said. I don't care, I rubbed my head with a glare, but then grinned when I saw Luffy try to take the mug off. He stood on the table and said. It broke my heart to leave, but I had to go. You see Luffy, Aki, when a pirate flag beckons, you must heed its call. The men cheered and raised their glasses and I brought back to the present when I heard Luffy say. He used to go on and on. I heard enough about you to make my ears bleed. Let me tell you he was a great pirate. I nodded. He was a bit annoying sometimes, but he was a really cool asked. Really, I sure am proud of the old man. Traveling on the open sea, Usopp said. I wish I could do adventures like that, Nami asked. Could you help us then? We need decent boat, Usopp sighed and said, making a weird face looking out the window. This is a small village. Sorry, we can't help you. I wonder what's up with the weird face, Zoro said. What about the huge mansion? The one on top of the hill, he had a scared face on, Nami asked. Hey, do you know them, Usopp? Maybe they can help us with all that money, he yelled. You stay away from there. We looked at him confused and he made some weird noises and said. Sorry, but I got to do something. Everyone knows me at this place. I got to go, Nami asked. I wonder what got him in a hurry. I shrugged. Some people are weird. I looked at my food and realized I ate it all. I pouted and saw my Pocky untouched. I grabbed them and put them in a spare bag for later. I sat back down munching on chocolate Pocky. Luffy was drinking something when I had a weird feeling, like someone was watching me, but I ignored it and ate something off Nami's plate without her noticing. I hear kid voices yell. The Usopp pirates have arrived. I looked from my plate to see the 3 kids that ran away with wood swords in the air. Nami looked over at them and asked. Who are these kids? One said. Captain Usopp is gone. The one with the green thing on his head stood in front of us and yelled. Fess up and tell you what you done with our captain, you filthy pirates. The other 2 ran to his side and tried to look scary. Luffy patted his stomach and said. The meat sure was good. They looked scared and I wondered why. One asked what meat while the other said we were cannibals. Oh, so they thought we ate Usopp. Wow, that's funny. Nami giggled and Zoro said. If you're looking for your captain, we ate him. He had a dark grin and my stomach hurt from holding in my laughter. All I did was sadder at them with my own grin and lick my lips. Thanks Zoro, that was fun. Look at their faces. Their eyes popped out as they yelled. Ah, they're cannibals. They were looking at Nami and she yelled back. Why are you looking at me, me? Luffy and Zoro were cracking up while Nami yelled at us, but it made me laugh harder, banging my fist on the table. I stood up and noticed the kids on the floor with terrified expressions on their faces. We followed the kids up the hill once we told them it was a joke, but Nami made us. We were in front of the gate and one of them said. You really had us there. Luffy looked at the gate and said. Whoa, this place is huge, one of the kids said. Yeah, and if the captain ran off at this hour, this is where he will be. Usopp doesn't look rich, Luffy said. "Oh, what in the world does he come here for?" the one with the hat on his head and purple hair said. "He comes here to lie." Nami moved her head forward as she said. "To lie? That's terrible," the one with green hair said. "No, it's great, isn't he?" the one with the straw-colored hair agreed with him, and Zoro asked, "How is a liar awesome?" one of them said, while I was looking around. "The one Kaya is weak in bed since her parents got sick and died a year ago. She very rich, but all that money couldn't help her recover from her sadness. So Captain tells her made-up stories to cheer her up." "Captain is the best at telling lies," I said. "I guess that's nice, not the way I used to tell lies as a kid and get in trouble." Luffy laughed. Him being around to see me get caught and smacked him. He just grinned at me. They all agreed on what I said, and the purple-haired kid said, "The best is his mischievous side," the green-haired one said. "I like him because he's not afraid to be silly," the straw-haired one said. "I love his crazy lies," Nami asked. "So when he tells her those stories, he makes her feel better," they nodded. Luffy threw his fist in the air and yelled, "Great, we should ask him for a ship after all," Zoro said. "We're not the ones who make her feel better, Usopp is," the kid said. "Getting in by the gate is impossible. The guards won't let anyone through." They asked where Luffy was, and I heard his voice say, "I'll ask her, I really need to keep an eye on him." He was on the top of the gate. He stretched his arms saying, "Gum gum," I heard Zoro say. Oh no, high arms were stretched so much his back was just hovering the ground. The kids started screaming about Luffy's arms while Luffy said in a strained voice, "Pardon for the intrusion." They all tried to stop him, which I knew could not happen, so I hung on Zoro's shirt in the back so I didn't get left behind. It's either join them or lose them or something like that. We all flew in the air and I grinned. This is fun. I forgot how fun it was. Usopp looked at us shocked. He was in a tree. Luffy crashed on the ground and I landed on all four with only a small pain in my hands and feet. "Thank you, devil fruit powers," Usopp said. "Don't worry, this happens to me all the time. They are probably new recruits for the Usopp pirates." Luffy stood up and I got out of my crouched posture as he said, "No, I wanted to ask you a favor," she asked. "A favor? From me?" She had a soft voice, but she seemed nice. She was pretty, blonde hair and brown eyes. I said, scratching the back of my head, and said, "What Luffy means is, a boat, miss. What can I say? I have some manners." I heard a voice say, "Hey, you there. What do you think you are doing?" I blinked and looked to see a man with slick back black hair with a tint. A weird white shirt that had curls on the collar. Gold things on each side of a full suit with a tie and glasses. I heard Kaya mumble him name and then he said, "Get out. I'll have you know this is criminal trespassing." He pushed up his glasses and I scowled. I don't like this guy. He was too stuck up and rude. I'm not using a small bit of manners on him. Luffy asked. "Hey guys, who's he?" Kaya said. "Actually Kurahadal, these people are." She didn't get to finish because Kurahadal said, "Not now, Kaya. You can tell me all about this riffraff once they left. Now all of you get out unless you have some business with me." I glared at him. Who the hell does he think he is calling riffraff? Luffy said to him. "Alright, do you think you could help us get a ship?" He stared at us and said. "Absolutely not." Luffy sulked and I patted him on my shoulder. He looked up at the tree and called out, "Usopp, you have quite the reputation. You are very well known in the village." Usopp gave a laugh and said, "Sure am," Kurahadal said. "You had been on an adventure. Quite impressive as someone as young as you." You could hear him mocking him while Usopp said, "Usually people who admire me so much call me Captain. So it's Captain Usopp to you," Kurahadal said. "Captain?" He laughed and pushed up his glasses and said, "Your father also had quite the reputation." I scowled again. "He better not insult him," Usopp said. "What?" Kaya called down. "Kurahadal, just stop," the guy said. "You'll never be anything more than the son of a filthy pirate." I clenched my fist. Nothing is wrong being the child of a pirate. I'm one. Luffy's face was shadowed and I looked to the ground feeling a dark look in my own face as I fixed my goggles over my eyes tightly. Kurahadal said, "Who knows what you're up to now? All I ask is that you and your kind leave this respectable lady alone." I ground my teeth in my mouth. What the hell does he mean by that? I looked down the ground, knowing my face was pissed off. Usopp asked. "What?" he answered back. You and she are from completely different worlds and you know it. Is it money you're after? How much do you want? It seems like Kaya was finally fed up because I heard her yell at him. Apologize to him, Usopp said. Hey, calm down Kaya, Kurahadal said. I don't see a need to apologize to this savage young man, my lady. Savage? How far is this bastard going to go on? All he does is lie a bit and it's for a good cause. My goal isn't to slander. I sympathize with your situation. You must hate your idiot of a father for abandoning his family and village cause of his mindless goal for treasure, Kaya screamed at him again while I felt myself shake. I know a lot of people from Shanks's crew. I know I can't jump in, this is Usopp, he's insulting the worst. Usopp said in a pissed off voice. Don't you dare insult my father ever again. Usopp jumped down from the tree as Kaya called his name. Man, if she is sick. This could not be helping her at all. Kurahadal gave a little laugh and said. Why have you gotten so worked up, Usopp? It's times like these you would do best and lie. Tell me about your father as a traveling salesman or how you aren't related by blood. Usopp ran at him and punched him in the face and I smirked while I heard a couple of gasps behind me. I shook my head, that's what you get for insulting a pirate. If Usopp didn't do it, I would have. The kids yelled out Captain and Kurahadal lifted his head up and said. He resorts to violence. I guess the apple doesn't fall far from the tree does it, Usopp yelled. Shut up, I frowned and bit my lip so I didn't yell at the bastard myself. He was insulting me without knowing it, but I can take an insult or two. It's not like I care what this bastard thinks, Usopp said. My father listened to his heart and chose life of risk and adventure. I'm proud to say my old man is a brave warrior of the sea. You're right. I'm known to execrate from time to time, but I will never lie about who my father is. I refuse to be ashamed of my heritage. I am a son of a pirate. He was bowed to the ground and I felt a sincere smile come to my face. I will always be proud of who my parents are. I lifted my head and stared down at Kurahadal and felt a weird feeling inside me, like I should hate him, but it was coming from my canine side of me. It was a feeling I got every time I stared at a feline. Kurahadal started chuckling as he said. Pirates are brave warriors of the sea, are they? That is quite a way of twisting things. You don't seem to understand that you are living proof of savage blood. You go around sprouting lies and violence when you don't get your way. You cozy you to the lady of the house and steal her fortune, Usopp said back. You're wrong. While this was going on, my blood was boiling and I felt my body shake in anger. Do people like this look down on people like me? I too am proud about who my parents were or like Ace. I can't take garbage like that. I was broke out of my pissed off thought by Kurahadal yelling. Your father is a filthy no-good pirate. Trickery is in your blood. Of course it's in your blood. Usopp grabbed him collar and I snapped. Shut up. You think you anything. If you hate him then you must despise me. I'm a child of two pirates and I won't let you badmouth his father who I know is a great man or anyone because they have pirate blood in them, you dirty bastard. You're the real S here. I was breathing heavy and I felt my body shake from the released rage. I felt stares at me and felt a hand on my shoulder, but I glared at him as Usopp let go of Kurahadal in shock. He said. Then let me ask, who are your parents? I smirked and was filled with pride in my chest as I said. Grade D Akira and Grade D Hikaru. His eyebrows were raised as he said. That makes sense. Being friends with S like Usopp. You both have filthy parents in common. My eyes widened as I felt my face heat up in rage. Throwing away any common sense, I launched myself at him, but felt Luffy rubbery arms around my waist and pulled me toward him as I struggled. There was Usopp yelling but my eyes were clouded in anger, but I heard Kaya yell. Stop it, both of you. I can't take it. Kurahadal isn't a bad person. He just tries to do what he thinks is best for me, but he goes too far. I called down and was breathing heavy. Luffy was leaning on both my shoulders with an arm on each one and his chin on my head. He was the only person that could calm me down. I know him so long and we are family, simple as that. Usopp backed away because of Kaya, Kurahadal said. Leave this place, you are never to return again, Usopp said. Yeah, I get it. You don't have to tell me twice buddy, Usopp walked past him as he said. This is the last you'll ever see of me, I said to Luffy. I'm okay now, Luffy. Sorry, he stood by my side instead and grinned at me when I turned, he said. It's fine Aki. It doesn't matter. I saw the 3 kids ran in front of the bastard and the one with purple hair said, "Hey, why'd you say that for? Captain isn't like that." Luffy moved back to where he was as the 2 other kids called him a jerk face, and I grinned when Luffy yelled at 2. Zoro punched him in the head and said, "Shut up, you don't have a bone to pick with him." He stared at them and they ran behind Nami while Zoro held Luffy back and I sweat dropped. "Didn't just stop me from kicking his ass. Sometimes I really don't understand him," Kurahadal said. "You will all leave right now." We walked away from him and was leaving. They were at the gate and I stared at him. I didn't move and had my arms crossed over my chest with a glare. He asked me, "Why are you still doing here, filth?" I wrinkled my nose at him and did something very childish. I gave him a dog-like grin and stuck my tongue out. I heard the kids gasp, Nami growl and Zoro and Luffy crack up laughing in the bastard's face. With a satisfied smirk, I turned on my heel and left with the rest of them. I followed Luffy when the rest of them were not looking and I knew he went to follow Usopp. I wanted to talk to him anyway. We saw him on a cliff staring out into the ocean and he probably didn't know we were here. Luffy climbed up the tree quietly and hung upside down in front of him, while I just sat next to him like a normal person. Luffy asked, "Hi, what are you doing here?" Usopp answered, "I came here to be alone, but I guess that didn't happen. Did you follow me? What do you want?" I sighed and said with a frown. "Usopp, I know how you feel, but we are a bit different." I curled my legs to my chest and rested my crossed arms on them and put my chin there, looking out into the ocean. He asked, "How?" I said with a sigh. "My parents are dead. Your father is alive." He looked away from me and said, "Maybe they are just lost at sea." I chuckled darkly and said, "That's impossible. I saw it myself." He said, "Oh," and it was quiet. I ignored everything around me and started thinking about how much I hate the Marines and for what they done. I heard Usopp yell, "What's he doing here?" I blinked and saw Luffy face first on the ground with Usopp hand on his head. I crawled over to them and saw that bastard butler and some guy that looked weird. Kurahadal said, "I thought I told you to be insidious. That doesn't mean sleeping in the road," the other guy said. "Relax, man. I perfected the idea of the chameleon. I blend in," Luffy said. "What's going on and who is that weird man with him?" I shrugged as Usopp said, "I don't know, I never seen him before," Kurahadal asked the weird guy. "So, have all the necessary preparations been made?" He pushed up his glasses with the heel of his hand. "He seems to do that a lot," the weird guy said. "But of course. We can start at any time. On the rich girl murder plan." The man a weird pose and my eyes widened. "The only rich girl is Kaya." Usopp seemed to get it too. Kurahadal said, "Don't call it murder, Django. I don't like the sound of it." I scowled. "Murder is murder. No matter what you call it in the end," Django said. "Oh right, accident. An accident that you planned?" Luffy asked. What are those guys talking about?" Usopp said. "Shush, be quiet. If you listen we'll find out," Kurahadal said. "We can't simply kill her. It is our job that Kaya perishes in an unfortunate accident. So don't screw it up," Django said. "So basically on your signal the minute I storm in the village and accidentally kill the rich girl then you get her inheritance and we all get paid, right?" Kurahadal turned around and said. "You moron, your ignorance is astounding. We're not related so how can I get anything?" Django said. "You'll work very hard to," Kurahadal said. "No Django, I won't. Now listen to me. This is the most important part. Before you kill her we'll use your hypnosis to have her write her will. And it will say I will waive my entire inheritance to my butler Kurahadal." I heard Usopp gasp and felt disgust coil in my stomach. He said, "Then I will have control over enormous fortune and no one will suspect a thing. I have spent 3 years to gain the trust of everyone around me so I would be unsuspecting to get her to leave the entire inheritance to me." Django got up and said, 3 years being a butler, huh, Captain Kuro? 3 years ago you said you were giving up life as a pirate. You set someone up and let the world see Captain Kuro get executed. Only now do I understand that was the beginning of this plan. You're the man of 1,000 plans," Kurahadal snapped. "Don't call me that ever again. I lost that name years ago. I wish to gain my wealth without attracting the attention of the government. In other words, I'm a pacifist." Django cracked up laughed and I started to growl and snarl under my breath scaring the shit out of Usopp. Django sighed. "Murdering an entire family isn't peaceful," Kurahadal said. Hold on, I didn't murder an entire family. The father's death wasn't planned, Django said. Whatever you say, it makes no difference to me. Hurry up and give the word. The crew is getting bored. They have been out there for a week. They're growing more anxious by the minute, Luffy asked. What are they talking about? Bad guy stuff. I sighed. I'm not even that thick. Usopp said to him angrily. What, weren't you listening to any of that? Those guys are not just bad, they're evil, I said to Luffy. They want to kill Usopp, friend, he frowned and said. That's not right, I nodded. Usopp said. Captain Kuro is known to be the most scheming pirate around. Though he is known for his smart, he is legendary for his brutality. Word has it that the Marines captured and killed him 3 years ago. But he is the butler Kurahadal and he has his sights on it for the last 3 years. First they'll attack the village and then they'll attack Kaya. Usopp held his head and said. This is bad, this is seriously bad. He stood up while Usopp told him to stay down and my eyes widened when I saw him open his mouth. Oh no, he wouldn't, but he did, he yelled. Hey bad guys. You better stay away from that girl. Usopp fell back and I chuckled before standing next to him. Django asked. Who are they? Usopp grabbed his arm and started yelling at him. I rolled my eyes. Usopp, just let him go, Kurahadal said in a voice full of contempt. Well, if it isn't Usopp, the mischievous town liar. Usopp's scared expression turned even more scared. I just stared down at him with a growl rumbling in my chest. Kurahadal asked. Did you hear anything? Usopp started shaking his head and saying that he didn't, but Luffy said. We heard it all. Usopp started yelling at him and I glared. Kurahadal, or should I say Captain Kuro. We heard everything like he said. I knew there was something wrong with you, he said, clucking his tongue. Your words don't matter to me, filth. He chuckled at my mad look and chuckled while nodding and turning away. The Django guy looked at us, he said. Pay attention kids and watch this ring closely. It was a silver circle on a string and I almost laughed. What the hell could that do? Django said. On the count of Django you will be in a deep sleep. 1, 2, Django. Usopp ducked for cover and I wondered if it was a joke, but then I got tired. My eyes were flickering closed. I heard a crash and then a pain in my neck as I landed on something soft and then I went out like a light. Third point of view. Zoro and Nami were following the 3 kids to the cliff where Luffy and Aki were supposed to be. One of the kids said. This is the place, another said. Captain always comes here when he has to think, the last kid said. It is nice. They looked around and saw the sea, but no Aki or Luffy. Nami stepped on some rocks and said. Things sure are loose here. Zoro looked at her dangerously close to the edge and called out to her. Nami, careful. She nodded and stepped away from the edge. Nami looked down and yelled. Look down there, Zoro said, also looking down. Luffy, Aki. Aki was on her back with her head on the ground while Luffy was on the ground too with his butt in the air and hat on the ground. The kids also looked at the duo on the ground. The purple-haired kid said. Yeah, and his butt. They all simmed down and stood above them. Nami gasped, looking them over. Luffy, Aki. How did this happen? One of the kids said. They fell, another one said. So that's why our captain looked so upset. Zoro heard some noises come from Luffy and said. Wait a minute. Zoro chuckled with a grin when he noticed Luffy's snoring and Aki's chest rise and fall that the others didn't notice, he said. Lazy bums. He poked Luffy in the butt with his sword that was sheathed and kicked Aki in the side with some force. But not too much. Aki woke up with a yelp and half-lidded eyes and Luffy sat up and stretched and yawned loudly with his mouth wide open. Luffy said. Good morning guys. Aki's point of view, I heard Luffy say as I bent my arms back to get rid of the stiffness. Good morn, and saw the bright sky, I asked confused. I slept till morning. I felt a punch to my head and wince when I saw Nami glaring at me. No you idiot. After Nami was done being mad at me, I remembered why I was sleeping in the first place. We told them everything we heard from that bastard butler, or Kuro as we now know. The kids panicked as I stood up and brushed off my clothes. I said, looking down at Luffy. Thanks to you I didn't get serious injury. I think I fell on you. He grinned and gave me thumbs you, but looked confused to how he saved me. The kids shouted at once. They're going to kill Kaya. I grabbed Luffy's hat and gave it to him. He plopped it on his head and said. Yep, that's what they said. No question about it. The kids gave a yell in fear. Zoro asked, "What made you think it would be a good idea for a nap?" Luffy laughed and said, "That's the thing, I don't remember falling asleep or getting down here." He spaced out and I yelled out, "I remember, some guy named Django made us." Zoro shook his head. "So you met that guy too?" I nodded, but I guess Zoro didn't like him because his eye was twitching. They started having a conversation, but I spaced out thinking about that Kuro guy. I knew him calling us trash was an act, but there is something about him I just can't stand, and it's not the killing thing, even if that angers me. I was brought back when I heard Luffy say loudly, "Oh no, we need to pack up before the meat shop guy leaves." I face-palmed as Zoro hit him with his sword. Zoro said, "That's not the issue at hand here. We went over to the road after they were done talking and was next to this fence. This place was confusing and I almost got lost." The three kids yelled, waving. "Hey Captain." I was sitting on the fence top part and resting my feet on the space in the middle on top of the lowest board. Anyway, I looked over and saw Usopp with a smile on his face. Luffy called to him. "Hey." I waved and for some reason his face was shocked. Usopp asked, "Wait, you're both alive again?" Luffy asked, confused. "Alive? Yeah, and I had a pretty good nap," the kid with green hair said. "Yeah, and they were sleeping the whole time," the one with purple hair said. "Yeah, and we hear about those pirates and their evil plan," straw-haired boy said. "Yeah, so we better hurry to warn the people in the village so they have time to get away." He looked down and he started shaking and I was worried he would start crying. I wouldn't really know what to do. Then he started laughing loudly with his head thrown back. He said, "Well, I'm obviously lying like usual, that butler, because of what he said. I thought I'd get him back and say he was a pirate." I blinked with a frown. "Why would he lie?" The kids started laughing. I looked at Luffy and he had a blank look. I looked down at the kids and smiled. Of course. They started walking away and he asked, "Hey, where are you going?" the one purple hair said. "Honestly, you really disappointed me," the green-haired one said. "Yeah," while the straw-haired kid said, "Even though that butler guy was a jerk, I never thought you would lie to hurt someone and admired you for being a kind heart person." His face grew even more shocked. This must really be eating him up inside if I was right about the real reason he said it was a lie. I had times where I did something like that to protect Luffy or even people I was close to, which wasn't many. With nothing else to do, I hopped down and we walked back to the cliffside and Nami treated his arm where he got hurt and he was whimpering. I was on the ground with my arms behind my head and Luffy and Zoro above me. Luffy asked, "So why did you lie to them?" Usopp answered, "Because all I do is lie. There was no way anybody was going to believe what I had to say." "Why should they?" Zoro came closer and said, "Because what you were telling them was the honest truth," I said. "If you must know, I think it was brave that you got those kids away from danger." He smiled at me, but I closed my eyes with a sigh. "But they are coming and they are going to level this whole town," Usopp said. "What am I supposed to do? If I warn them, they'll think I'm lying. Everyone in the village will think this will be a normal day." I heard some sniffling and sighed again. I seem to do that a lot. I heard him yell suddenly, "They think I'm lying and that's all they'll ever think. I'll stop those pirates at the beach myself." I opened my eyes and smirked. Usopp said, "This is my fault for being such a liar. I don't care anymore if they shoved me away with brooms or shovels, or shot me in the arm. This is my village and my home. And I love everyone in it." He was crying and Zoro said, "You hell of a good guy getting rid of your cronies to go into battle alone like Aki said." I nodded and gave him a grin. I asked Luffy, "Hey Luffy, can we forget the long speech and fight already?" Nami glared at me and said, "I don't care about the stupid fighting. The pirate treasure is all mine." Luffy grinned at me and said, "Right, we'll give you a little help." I clapped. "Yeah, I didn't get to kick any ass last fight. Luffy, you promised." He nodded with a grin of his own. He was still crying with a hand on his face as he said, "You're gonna still help me fight all these pirates?" "I don't get it," Luffy said. "You said there was a whole bunch of bad guy, right? Plus I did promise Aki a fight?" Nami stared at me with a face that I'm used to. It said, "You are not normal." I shrugged her off as Zoro said, "And you look scared out of your mind." I said, "Yeah, Usopp, you're gonna need our help." Usopp pointed at his chest and yelled, "For your information, I have nerves of steel and am perfectly okay with tones of bad guys. After all, "You're looking at Captain Usopp, brave warrior of the sea." His legs were shaking, so then started punching them as he said, "Alright, fine, I'm scared. But these guys are from Captain Kuro. These guys mean business. I don't want your pity." "If you're here for pity, I don't want it," Zoro said. "We're not laughing at you, we're helping you because you are honorable," Luffy said. "You really think we'd risk our lives over pity?" I laughed as I stood up. "Yeah, right. I don't know the meaning of the word." I laughed some more. Usopp stared at us with tears going down his face as he said, "You guys, it was night now and we climbed up this hill thing and followed Usopp," he said. "Okay, at daybreak, the pirates will attack at this shoreline. But the only way they will be able to go to the village would be up this slope. Rock walls were on either side of us." I spaced out and just followed automatically. I was getting bored of climbing, but deciding not to say anything. Usopp brought me out of my thoughts, saying a little louder, "What are you guys good at?" Luffy said with a grin. "I stretch," Nami said. "I steal," Zoro said. "I cut," I shrugged. "Punch, I guess," Usopp said. "I hide," I growled under my breath as we all yelled. "You'll fight this time." Luffy caught him in a headlock as Usopp choked out. "Come on, I was just making it funny, calm down." I rolled my eyes at this. Sure he meant that. I sure he was so used to running, that's what his first reaction would be to do in the face of danger. Luffy let him go. He got a barrel of oil and let it fall down the hill. "Wow, that actually isn't that bad of a plan," Usopp said. "I'm such a genius." I rolled my eyes. At least I know not to say my praise out loud. I looked around and thought we were real relaxed for people about to be fighting pirates. I then shrugged. Do I ever worry about fighting? I was broke out of my thoughts when I heard Luffy said, "Usopp, I got to hand it to you. You know how to fight dirty?" I nodded and grabbed the back of Luffy's shirt and pulled him away from the spill so he wasn't touching it. He pouted at me, but I ignored it, Usopp said. "Of course I am. There is nobody that can best me with a slingshot or beat me at the art of fighting dirty." We smirked at his words. Zoro said, "It's almost daybreak, they will be coming soon." I agree, finally a fight, Nami and Usopp BTH yelled. "Be normal for once, will you?" I ignored this with a smirk on my face while Zoro and Luffy just laughed. We were waiting for a while until Luffy finally whined. "Where are they? I thought we were going to fight." "What's the big deal?" I groaned and said. "Calm down, Luffy, I want to fight too," Zoro sighed and said. "Maybe they overslept." "Really? The only person that sleeps intentionally that much would be Zoro himself," Usopp said. "Nope, they're going to show up all right and lots of them." Nami then walked over somewhere and held her ears as she said, "I think I'm hearing things, but I hear battle cries from somewhere." I blinked confused. She said, "Yeah, I defiantly hear them," Usopp said in a panicked voice. "No, it can't be. There is a shore just like this one to the north." I looked at him with my eyes wide as Luffy asked, "What? We're at the wrong shore," I said. "How do you not know where they would go? This is your own home village," he said. "I didn't know. Okay. This where they had their secret meeting, so I thought they'd be here." I sighed with a slight glare. Luffy said, "We need to hurry before they get to the next village." "Where is it?" Usopp said. "You have to head directly north from here. If you run you can make it in 3 minutes. The terrain there is exactly the same there. All we need to do is stop them at the slope," Nami gasped and said. "If those filthy pirates are at the north shore, then they already seen our boat. They'll take our treasure," I glared and said. "Now isn't the time to think about money. Usopp's village is in more danger than before," Luffy said as Nami glared at me. "Yeah, Aki, you're right. I'll be there in 20 seconds. Luffy ran up the slope and I wondered if I should go. I then remembered how Zoro got lost all the time. I decided to stay with him. My sense of direction is a little bit better than Zoro's. Also, Luffy might do some stupid things, but he can take care of himself." Usopp ran after him and Nami stared, whining about her treasure. "Seriously, she needs to get her priorities straight," Zoro asked. "What are you doing? Let's get out of here." Me and Zoro were about to walk off, but then I heard Nami yell and Zoro grabbed the back of my shirt and I fell backwards. I yelled, "Zoro! Get off!" I was sliding backwards trying to grab onto the ground, but we were in the oil. Ew, this oil feels so weird. I was grabbing the ground and trying to dig my hands into the dirt, but could not get loose. I felt a shoe step on my head. I looked up and saw Nami. Damn it, it must have been her. I slid down the slope rolling a couple of times until I hit the bottom. I'm going to hurt Nami. Zoro was next to me and I heard Nami call down to us. Sorry, but the treasure is in danger. I ground my teeth. How am I supposed to get up there now? Zoro started running up and also tried, but I fell on my back and watched Zoro as he tried. I got up and went to try again. I looked at the oil closely. Before I could react, Zoro fell on me and I fell to the ground. I groaned and said, "Zoro, you're heavy, get off." He did and flipped on his back, breathing heavy. I sat up and muttered. "Now how do we do this?" Zoro said out of breath. "Nami, if you're still alive, when I get out of here I'm going to kill you." I nodded my head in agreement. Her and her damned treasure. He took his swords out and said to me, "Aki, get on my back." I tilted my head in confusion, but got on his back. He used his swords to get up the hill and I jumped off his back as he bent off breathing heavy. I said with a grin. "Thanks, Zoro." He nodded and a dark look was on his face. Zoro said, "Now how do I get from the North Shore to here?" I shrugged and said, "I don't know this place very well." He sighed and gave another nod. We ran off to find the North Shore and RN into Luffy somehow. I stopped suddenly and said, "Hey Luffy, Zoro. I hear something from over there." We ran in that direction and saw a bunch of guys running toward us and I felt a growl come from my throat. Now I know why I had an instinct to hate that bastard. He was too much cat-like for me to deal with. All three have knocked the guys down the hill and they flew in the air and landed at the bottom of the slope. I grinned and was standing in the middle of Zoro and Luffy. One of them yelled, "You never told us we'd be facing monsters like them." I heard Nami mutter something. Zoro said, "Is that all those pirates can dish out?" Luffy said, "Yeah, I was hoping for a challenge. All I did was give a nod and put my goggles over my eyes and stick my hands in my pockets, making it look like I was standing in a casual way." I snorted and said while shaking my head, "I had spars worse than that." Zoro looked at Nami and yelled with a glare, "And you're lucky I'm not down there kicking your butt too. I punch her later." Luffy looked down and yelled, "Usopp, you big bonehead. You never told me which direction was north." I sighed and stared at the pirates on the ground. Django asked, "Who are these guys?" They all stared at us and I wondered about the Kuro guy. Where the hell was he anyway? Lightly shanking my head, I saw Usopp on the ground beat up. "I guess he fought already," Usopp said sitting up. "Wow, you guys are really that strong? That was great." Luffy was breathing heavy. Nami asked, "Could you have been slower? What took you so long?" My eyes widened into a glare. I yelled, "Are you kidding me? You made me and Zoro fall down the damned oil slope?" I was breathing heavy and my eyes were narrowed into mere slits. "Zoro was pissed too because he screamed at her," Nami said. "It was an accident. I slipped and you both fell." My eyes widened. Did she seriously just say that? Zoro yelled. "It should have been you." I nodded in agreement. Luffy said, "Run the way north," that's what he said. "How am I supposed to know where north is?" Usopp told him to shut up and then Django started yelling at the men. Some of them started to slowly get up and I saw him take something out of his pocket. I saw him take out his ring thingy and my eyes widened before I looked away as he said, "After 1, 2 Django you will all begin to grow stronger. Your wounds will heal." Luffy questioned what he was doing as Nami said, "It looks like hypnosis." I nodded in agreement. The Django guy did his thing and they all screamed and one punched a cliff and it actually broke to pieces. I paled. Okay, that a little scarier than before. "I will just have to work harder now," Zoro said. "That one gut destroyed the cliff." "What power?" Nami said. "I always thought hypnosis was a joke." I said, "Well, it looks real to me," Nami said. "I know that." I ignored that and got in a more stiff position than before. I looked at Luffy as they all cheered and my eyes widened. "Please don't tell me." His face was shadowed by the straw hat. "The pirates charged at us," Zoro said. "You guys might want to move. Luffy, me and Aki will handle it from here." Usopp ran past us and the guys still changed, getting closer. Luffy then began growling and I sighed. Zoro, he hypnotized too. His eyes were wide when he looked at me. He screamed at Luffy for being stupid once he realized what I said after Luffy loud yell. He ran it then and his fist went flying as he roared, "Gum Gum Gatling." I whistled at the sight with my hands on my hips. They all went down the slope. beaten up, and I pouted. Hey, he didn't leave any for us. I felt a hit on my head and Zoro say. Quiet you, I huffed, but said nothing else. Django was behind them muttering to himself. Luffy ran after them and they ran away screaming in fear. He ran past all the men and Django and ran to their boat and tried to break the mast off. My eyes widened with a grin as the thing cracked and I heard Nami question him from behind me. He had the mast now in his hands and he glared at them and they ran back this way as they shouted help from their captain. Well, if they are coming, they let them. They said taking the metal thing. 1, 2, Django fall asleep. The fast fell on Luffy and I winced. If Luffy was not made of Rue. Thank Kami he is. I narrowed my eyes at that Django character. I heard Nami and Usopp above us, Nami said. It looks like those guys are down for the count, I frowned. Yeah, too bad. I heard Zoro chuckle, used to my want to fight, and Nami yell. What the hell do you mean too bad? I shrugged and looked at where Luffy was snoring under the mast. I wish I could get him, even if I know he was fine. I was on watch out for anything else. I heard an annoying voice say. Hey Bochi, check this out. Django had a smile while he held his hat that I did not like. Django yelled. Come forth Meow Band brothers. 2 just flipped over and I saw one had green hair, green eyes, short shorts and a blue shirt. He just looked weird though. His face made me angry and I finally knew the reason. The other one was way fatter and had stripped pants and no shirt with a cape and cat ears on his head. They started posing and I felt a growl start from my throat. Without realizing it, I stepped forward a couple of steps and I felt Zoro's hand on my shoulder. I stopped and muttered. Sorry, the dog in me took over, Django told them as they jumped in front of him. Butchie, Siam, as you can see, we need to get up this hill, but our path is blocked. If you would be so kind as to move this obstacle. They started freaking out when they looked at us and I was growling and felt my shoulders tremble a little in my anger, Siam said. Ah, we couldn't do that, they looked too strong. I gave another one of my crazed and fight-hungry grins. They started complaining and I scowled. I don't want to fight weaklings. They are making us fight people that just guard a ship, Django said. Siam, just do it already. He grabbed his head after giving a girlish shrill scream. Siam still was whining when Django snapped. Just go, Sean recoiled and said. Fine, I'll just stop yelling. He was crying and Name commented on it. What's the big deal? No pirate's captain in their right mind would take someone like that. Siam ran at us screaming and my haunches went up on reflex of a cat going near me and I growled low in my throat and then in came from my mouth make Zoro freeze for a second next to me. Zoro took out one of his swords and shouted. You come any closer and I'll put you in half. I stood a little lower, my legs spread a bit with my hands out. Zoro continued to shout at him and then he suddenly stopped with a dark shadow on his face. He said in a low voice. Not likely, he launched himself at Zoro with surprising power and Zoro stopped him with his blade. I jumped and before I could attack him, Zoro yelled at me. Aki, stay away from my fight. I looked at him with narrowed eyes, but realized he could handle it and stepped down. Siam the bastard cat said. So, it seems you fell for my little trick. I'm impressed you blocked me, considering the brilliant performance I gave, I muttered. Don't flatter yourself. He licked his hand and I let out another growl at how like a cat he was. He looked at me and wrinked his nose and said. I sense a nasty mongrel, but this mutt isn't important. I see you're missing something. My eyes widened as I got angrier. Mutt? Mongrel? Who the hell does he think he's talking to? I was also angry at his foul play of taking Zoro's swords. I yelled. Who are you calling mongrel? You dirty feline. He glared at me, but then grinned at Zoro. Zoro said. Give me my swords back, Siam said. Swords? You already have one. How greedy can you be? He then threw them behind him and I grimaced. You should never mess with a swordsman's swords. Zoro ran at him. Zoro cut him and ran for his swords. I stood still remembering what Zoro told me. Aki, stay away from my fight. I grimaced when he landed on Zoro's back, he yelled. Now Bochi. Bochi was about to jump on Zoro and I jumped in the air too and tackled him with a little bit of difficulty. We were rolling on the ground and I had no idea what happened to Zoro. We were 2 feet away from each other and I yelled. That's Zoro's fight, you dirty coward, he said. Shut up, you dirty dog. I took a threatening step near him and said, "I am sick of you people calling me a damned dog. I ate a devil fruit called Inu Inu and I'm alpha here and we all know dogs will always beat cats," he said. "No way," I called back to them. "Zoro, I got this dirty kitten." I heard a grunt. I heard a bunch of slashing behind me and jumped when I was almost scratched. Bochi came at me again, but I didn't get away and he got me deeply in the arm and I gave a yelp. I kicked his stomach and made him go back a few feet. I made my fingernail go long, which was only the 6-inch, and blocked his swipes and got his side and jumped back while he yelled at me. I heard a yell and whipped around to see Zoro get slashed in the chest. I yelled, "Zoro!" I then got slashed in the back by Bochi before I could move. I sunk back to my knees in the dirt and made a pain-filled yelp. I went face down on the ground and felt my nose crack and blood come from my nose. I winced and put my cheek on the ground instead and looked at Zoro fall. Blood was still dripping on my back and out of my nose. Zoro was sitting as he held his chest and yelled, "You dumbass! Don't help me!" I moved my arms in front of me and pulled myself into a sitting position and ignored them as I took deep breaths. I was now hunched over trying to stand. Bochi kicked my back and I went back down. He stepped on the middle of injury and I bit my lip so he didn't hear a reaction. Like I said, he weighed a lot and he ran at Zoro. I jumped up, ignoring the pain, and let my nails grow long again, and I slashed Bochi on the same spot. He hissed as he turned around. He said, "I got to admit, for a dog, you're pretty good." I de-iced to save my energy and attack. We were just going at each other with claws right now. I was angry, so I guess it was working, and he was getting slashed at it as I yelled, "Who's the alpha now?" Then he ran in fear and I heard a familiar pissed, but annoying voice yell, "What the hell is going on?" I looked to see Kuro with a pissed off expression on his face. The pirates started freaking out and shaking. I kept an eye on Kuro and the fat cat at the same time. I walked next to Zoro while Bochi went next to Siam, his partner. I rolled my eyes at the dramatics. Kuro said, "To think that these brats held you back. How the black cat pirates have fallen." He got angry veins all on his head and I was surprised. The last time I seen him he was so calm. "What have you got to say for yourself, Django?" His voice echoed. Django said, Well, you said," he just kept mumbling and anyone could tell he was scared. "You said letting the kid go wouldn't cause any problems," Kuro said. "I did say that. He's an idiot. I knew no one would listen to his warnings and I knew he would come back to defend here. But what I didn't come in account for was your inexcusable weakness. Isn't someone a bastard?" Django tried to explain, but then Bochi said, "Who are you calling weak?" I rolled my eyes. "Oh, guess we get to hear the ego conversation now," Siam said, clicking his nails. "You used to be quite the killer. It's been exactly 3 years and we haven't been living the good life waiting on a rich girl hand and foot." Bochi decided to talk too. "Yeah, and we've been out sinking pirate ships and massacring villages," Kuro said. "Very good. Finished?" Siam yelled excitedly. "No, you've been doing nothing this whole time. We've been killing," Bochi said. "There is no way you can beat the Miaoban brothers. They ran past us," and I whispered to Zoro. "Really? In the middle of a fight?" I felt him shrug. Django tried to make them stop, but they kept going. A bag was near him and then it disappeared and so did he. I jumped in shock as he appeared in front of us, Zoro said. "How did he, behind him? What are those crazy weapons?" I had no answer, so I decided to just watch. Kuro asked, "Who are you going to kill?" He did that thing again and ended up behind them with those claws that just creep me out. My fingernails don't grow close to that long, the claws wearing. They were crying. Kuro continued, "I do feel a bit sluggish after all these years." I looked around and saw everyone alive. I breathed a sigh of relief. Nami was just getting up, but had a put on her shoulder and Usopp was just lying there and I knew Luffy was still asleep, Kuro said. "It seems years on dry land had made me soft. I'll give you 5 minutes. If you don't get rid of this problem in 5 minutes, I'll kill every last one of you." Great. One cat pisses me off and then another pisses me off even more. I'm a big believer on loyalty. He let go of them. They ran at us and I kicked Bochi away yelling, "I see you came back for more, kitty cat." I left Zoro alone and suddenly he had 3 swords thanks to Nami, Zoro said. "Ah, my swords. Be careful with them." I made my fingernails longer as he was distracted by Siam getting cutted and crowned. I said, "Inu Inu." Bochi turned around and I slashed deeply at his chest and fell with his partner and I said, "Slice." I was smirked as I stood by Zoro again. Zoro said, "Carrying 3 swords won't help you at all, Ulyss. You know 3 swords style." I grinned. "Hell yeah. That's what I call a fight." Zoro pointed his sword at Kuro and said with a chuckle, "I can promise you that everything will be taken care of in less than 5 minutes." I nodded and said, "And like I said before, the dog always beats the cat." He chuckled and said, "3 minutes left. Dogs also don't get to speak. We will see." I growled warningly. Kuro said, "He's still alive. You're not that great." I snorted and said, "Maybe he's not worth the kill." In my head I was kinda surprised. But then again, I and Luffy never really kill. The most we do I hurt really badly. He just looked at me and I stared back at him, right in the eye. Zoro said, "It must have been the blubber that protected his vitals." I nodded. That seemed to be it. I heard sounds and saw him gain a lot of muscles and my jaw dropped. What? That's not fair at all. He can't do that. I noticed Zoro's swords dropped out of his mouth in shock. He was coming towards us slowly and I braced myself in a crouched position. I saw the circle thing head at Nami and Zoro yelled, "Nami! Look out!" I looked at Luffy. "Luffy, please get up now." Luffy did get and he saved Nami by grabbing her foot and yelling at her, "Nami! You cannot go around by stepping on people's eye." I laughed at this, even if I had a crazy Bochi cat coming toward me. The disc Luffy in the face and it broke in his teeth and Nami cheered. Luffy gave a yell and I wondered what was wrong with him. Luffy yelled at Nami, "That hurt. Why'd you do that?" Nami yelled back, "Hey Sleepy Beauty, that wasn't me." "It wasn't me." She then fell back and I wondered if she was okay. Luffy was thinking the same thing because he asked her. His face fell when she said, "Do it for the treasure?" Luffy's face fallen and jaw dropped. "Is she serious?" I sighed. Luffy said, "Well, alright, sure." He picked up his hat and put it on. Luffy walked toward the crew and they scattered quickly. I looked at Zoro. "Do we take on Bochi together?" He shrugged and said back, "It depends." Suddenly I heard a clinking sound and Kuro said, "Time is up, you know the deal. Now you die." Luffy looked shocked at Kuro as he asked, "Wait, why is that shady butler here?" I face-palmed. "Really?" Kuro said. "Hey, it's that kid. Didn't he fall off a cliff? The girl should have died too now that I think of it." I snorted. Like falling off a simple cliff could kill us. Usopp was suddenly behind him and Kuro got pissed and then I just noticed Kaya. He tackled her so Kuro didn't hurt her. I blinked. What the rich sick village girl is doing here? They are also trying to kill her. This is the worst place to be, Kaya said. "Usopp, are you okay?" Usopp answered. "Kaya, what are you doing here?" Kaya said. "Usopp, I'm so sorry, I didn't believe you. I just couldn't believe it. That Karaha doll is a lying screaming pirate," Usopp said. "Never mind that. There was most likely most to the dramatic conversation, but it was too boring so I looked at my surroundings more." Kuro was staring at Usopp and Kaya. Zoro was still next to me. Bochi was in front of us looking as big as ever. Nami was passed out and Luffy was in front of Django. But no one was fighting, just listening to Kaya and Usopp. I was brought back by Kuro's voice. It was just that annoying. "This is no place for a lady. Please leave, madam." She had an angry face with tears almost going down her face. Kaya said, "Please stop it." I frowned. "She should really not be here." She screamed at him. Stop this right now, Karaha doll. She still thinks he's her butler. Seeing how fond she was of him before, that could get her killed," Kaya said. "I know what you're up to. Mary told me everything." We all looked at her with huff faces. Django asked, "When did the rich girl from the mansion get here?" I blinked. "Really? The crew started saying to kill her and stuff like that," Kaya said. "Karaha doll, if you want my fortune, then take it and leave this village alone," Kuro said. "I'll gladly take your fortune, Kaya. You see, acquiring fortune isn't enough. More than anything else, what I want is peace." "Really? That's a bunch of bull. Please don't tell me." He is about to go into a long speech, Kuro said. "Yes, you see, I have spent the last 3 years earning the trust of the entire village. To be honest, I find this place to be relaxing and I will live with this sublime peace of mind." Kaya took a step back. Kuro said, The glorious comfort of a peaceful life will be mine forever and ever, and in short, these pirates are coming and you will leave your fortune and die. Kaya, these things will happen. She was doing something in her jacket and I tensed. We were here to save her after all. Usopp tried to persuade her to leave, but she stood her ground. She pointed a gun at him, but I knew she would never do it. Her life is too sheltered to be able to pull the trigger. I frowned. This can't end well, Kaya said. Leave and never come back, Kuro said. Oh, you'd point a gun at me? They started talking back and forth. I see you're all grown up now. You've grown in the last 3 years, Miss Kaya. Don't you remember the things we went through? We spent so much time together. Even before your sweet parents passed away. You were more than my master, you were my best friend. So much time, together we suffered and together we rejoiced. She said his name, but the man continued and I clenched my fist and teeth. That bastard is messing with her head. This is like Shanks or Luffy or Makino or Ace or anyone that's been nice to me betraying me. He then started talking about all the fun times they had and it got me angrier with every word he said. SHW was crying now and he had the revolver in his hand as he said. I suffered and now I'll get everything I deserve. He took it from her and continued. I, who was once the respected Captain Kuro, had to bow and humble myself for some snot-nosed little girl. It went against every fiber of my being. He dropped the gun on the ground. Usopp grabbed the gun and was shooting at him, but he used that weird ability to get behind him as he said. Thank you reminding me, Usopp, I owe you for hitting me. Let's get even. The blades were around his head and I took a step forward, a warning growl low in my throat. I noticed movement behind me and smirked when I saw Luffy stretch and punch Kuro hard in the face. He fell back and I let out a laugh or two. Kuro was flat on his face and he said with a grin. If he hates getting hit so much, he's about to have a bad day. I laughed and chuckled as my agreement. The crew started panicking again about Luffy and I scowled at some of the stuff they said. Luffy's not a freak, just strange. I jumped when the 3 little kids hit him with normal items in the face yelling. The Usopp pirates have arrived. These people all need to leave. All 4 of them will just get in the way. I think we were all shocked about them showing up. Then the kids started bashing him in the head and everyone was freaking out while Zoro mumbled. Those Ruette themselves killed. Kuro stood up and they started screaming really loud and I pressed my palms of my hands to my ears. Damn, they're loud. Kuro slowly walked over to Usopp and hit him. He flew back a little and the kids yelled for him, Kuro said. That hurt. You developed a strange technique. Do you have powers from eating the devil fruit? Luffy answered. Yep. I'm a rubber man, ain't that for sure? That crew started whining in fear now and I rolled my eyes. Are they even pirates? Kuro ordered Django to kill Kaya and the little kids and Bochi attacked Zoro when Django ordered him to. He jumped in the air and I jumped out of the way along with Zoro. The whole floor cracked in a bunch of large chunks. I tried to steady myself. He attacked Zoro against one of the walls of the slope and I kicked him, but he grabbed my ankle and sung me and I hit the opposite wall on my back. I let out a small yell and curled into a ball. Aw, I got hurt on my back. I let my forehead hit the ground as I was on my hands and knees, shaking and trying to ignore the terrible pain in my back. I heard Usopp yell as I closed my eyes and steadied my breathing. They yelled back and I shook my head to stop the ringing in my ears. I'm weaker because of how bad my injuries were and then getting tons of pressure on them not helping at all. I remember hearing Usopp tell the kids to get away with Kaya and I was sitting at this point. Since Zoro had Bochi, I called out. You got this, right Zoro? He nodded and slashed at Bochi's chest and fell to the ground defeated. Usopp got away from Kuro and Zoro and Usopp left for the kids, with Usopp on his shoulder. I stood by Luffy's side. It's how I like to fight and how I have been fighting, by my brother's side. It was just us, Kuro and the crew that watched and won't do anything. Kuro hit Luffy and before I could hit him, he did the same to me. I landed on my back and jumped into a crouched position at the sudden pain. I stood up and saw Luffy do it too. The crew started saying something and I saw Luffy grab a large rock and stop an attack which ruined one of his claws to a stub. The rock was smashed and was next to us, face first on the ground. I asked Luffy. Do you think he gave up? He said. Nope, he still had that one claw. Luffy grinned as the crew was muttering about his claws and said. That only leaves 5 of those swords. I nodded and wondered how to get rid of those. Another rock. He got up slowly when the crew started cheering and said, "Shut your mouths, all of you." They shut up quick and Kuro said, "Soon I'll deal with you in the most appropriate manner." He started walking. "Extermination, and I'll also kill that fool Django." They started whining about what he said and Kuro said, "This plan is no longer your concern. When you are all dead, the village will know who to blame. I never intended to let any of his mongrels alive. No one who knows my true identity will live to tell the tale about it," one of the crew said. "You planned on killing us at the very beginning," Kuro chuckled as he said. 3 years ago, I planned to erase Captain Kuro and every last person that ever knew him. It's all part of my plan." He chuckled darkly as Luffy said, "You guys are dumb." I nodded in agreement. "Yeah, and the most uncool pirates I know." Kuro chuckled and I glared. "I swear white people can't be more like Shanks and or my parents or Usopp's dad," Kuro said. "We're uncool, huh? Pirates are nothing more than savages. Unable to rise above their animal nature. Without my plans, what would they be? My crew is nothing to me, simply a means to an end. Crew members are just pawns in the captain's game. If I tell them to fight, they better fight, and if I tell them to die, they better do it. They know the punishment for disobedience." I felt my face twitch in disgust. But then I decided to do the thing that would piss him off. I stared at him with no emotion in my face. He was getting madder and I guess Luffy was doing the same thing. He bared his teeth and yelled, "This is how pirates are. Don't you dare talk down to me," Luffy said. "You know, no matter how many hundreds or thousands of men you have that follow you, you'll never be as good as Usopp." I grinned in agreement to his statement. He glared at us and said, "You fools. Do you intend to say I'm inferior to someone pretending to be a pirate?" Luffy nodded and said, "That's right." I just stared at him with a still blank face. He burst out laughing and said, "Well, aren't you funny? Don't get all snappy because you cut off one of my cat claws. How exactly is he better than me?" "He did that food thing and I looked around as did Luffy," Luffy said. "Because he got heart." I heard Kuro behind us. "He got what?" Luffy gave me a look and I ducked as we both yelled, "You don't know what a true pirate is, Shanks." His crew and my parents' faces came in my head as did Ace's. Luffy stretched and punched Kuro into the wall. He slammed into it and I stood up. We could almost read each other attack just by looking at each other. When the dust cloud cleared, Kuro said, "How insulting. It seems you both need a lesson in what real pirates are like. Your first lesson would be about terror. A lesson I learning when I stared down death." He then started swaying like he was about to fall over, but this freaked out the crew for some reason. Luffy asked, "What? All he is doing is swaying." I looked at him shocked when a weird and dark look came in his eyes. I moved so my back was to Luffy, but no touching him. I heard Kuro yell. Out of the bag attack, I heard a scream and not a normal one. This was a pain-filled one. I turned my neck and saw one of Kuro's crew get flipped in the air and blood fly out. My eyes widened. Luffy asked shocked, "What's he doing over there?" More of his crew kept on getting cut and I said, "Luffy, he's hurting his own crew. He's one of the nastiest people I've ever met. The Marines will always be first. Killing your own crew." I looked at the slaughter with shock and a large ball of disgust in my stomach. I knew something was off about him when we first met. I saw Luffy get cut in the chest and I go one on my upper arm and I hissed in pain. I looked ahead again and felt my stomach get cut this time and saw my blood splash in front of me. I ground my teeth and felt my temper spike. "I'm really sick of getting cut up like a scratching post," Luffy screamed. "Don't you have any honor? Those men are your friends." I narrowed my eyes. This man is nothing like a pirate should be. I will be happy to see his ass get kicked even more than before just because he was a cat. Luffy moved a bit away from me and slammed Kuro into the ground and I grinned. "Hey, bastard, Luffy," and I said, "We found you." He stood up with a bleeding face and said, "You both should have accepted your fate like good children. Now look what you done. Now thanks to you my little pawns are still alive. And in misery, it would have been better to let them die at the attack." I growled, "I'm a very loyal person and he's pissing me off," Luffy said. "No matter what happens to me, I will never be like you," I nodded. "Yeah, a no good lying greedy bastard." He fixed his glare on us, but I could sense more anger on my comment, Kuro said. "Someone like you two can't," Kuro said. "You both are going to die today, But I hack you up like a fish. He shoved his large claws an inch from Luffy's face and I glared. He better keep those creepy things away from him. He did that thing again and before I could move, Luffy was already running after him. He did the thing and disappeared. I ran to Luffy and stood by him, only to get cut the same way in my other arm. I growled and said through clenched teeth to Luffy, "This has to stop now." He head hit mine and I knew he agreed with me. He sped near us and then was in front of me and Luffy turned to look at him and asked, "Aren't you tired? I bet you are after all the dancing around you has been doing," Kuro said. "Don't get cocky. That was simply a warm-up. The real fight begins now. Soon I will feed on your fear, by the whine of your agony at him, ready for any attack he was ready to give." He did the thing again and I looked around quickly. Why does he keep on doing that? Damn it, I'm sick of this damn thing. Luffy stretched his arms and grabbed him so it looked like he was giving Kuro a hug and Kuro was getting pissed. They were cheering Luffy and I was already annoyed with the fight so I yelled at them. "Shut up already." It got silent and I smirked. Luffy was handling it mine, so I watched him fight Kuro unless he needed help. Luffy glared at them and I ducked when I saw him make his head go all the way to them. He then slammed his head into Kuro and he fell over. I then stood back up straight. He crashed to the ground face first and I smirked while picking up Luffy's hat and pushing my goggles to my forehead. I walked over to Luffy and stood by him. They asked Luffy, "Who are you?" Luffy answered, "I'm Monkey D. Luffy and the only time a pirate should abandon his name is when he dies. I would never lose to a coward who ditches his name, betrays his friends and run from the sea." They looked at Luffy and saying they never heard it before. I glared at them and said, "Oh yeah, and remember this you kittens. I'm Grey Diaki and my name will be known throughout the sea." They stared at me, mumbling about not knowing my name either. Luffy smiled at me and I gave him his hat. He grinned at them and said, "Yeah, and I'm going to be king of the pirates." I laughed. I knew his catchphrase would come somewhere in here today. He took the hat and plopped it on his head, while grinning. He was about to grab Kuro, but I said, "Luffy, may I do the honors?" He gave me a nod and I grabbed Kuro's collar and threw him saying, "Now get out of here," Luffy said, "and never come back." They ran off. Nami ran to us and he sudden LT fell on Nami. I reminded me I've been running around injured, Nami said. "You did good, Luffy." I then collapsed to my knees and laid on the ground really said, "Aki, are you okay?" I said, Sleepy." I heard her laugh. Nami sat next to us and asked Luffy, "Why were you both so mad earlier?" Luffy answered, "Because I truly hate people like them, they're so wrong. That's not how friends should act." His hat somehow ended up on my stomach and Nami picked it up while saying, "What are you talking about?" I said, "Nami, I'm a very loyal person. I don't know if that has to do with being part dog or just me. But betrayal I take very hard and into heart." She stared at me and opened she mouth to say something. Luffy said, "I want some meat." I laughed when she shoved the hat on his head shouting at him, but groaned when I felt pain all over my body from getting hurt. I winced. Nami punched me on the head and I said, "Nami, what did you do that?" "It was the only place not injured," she said. "Do act so freely. You're hurt badly." I closed my eyes and ignored her. "I'm fine." Soon Usopp and Zoro came over and I waved. "Hi guys." Zoro looked down at me and said, "You look like shit." I grinned. "That's nice." He snorted and sat against the cliff face wall and Usopp aid. "Thanks guys, I couldn't have done it without you." I shrugged. "Hey, it was fun and I got my fight like Luffy promised," Usopp and Nami yelled. "Shut up about that already," I chuckled. Zoro said, "Give credit, I was so tired from all of the fighting, so I drifted off." I was woken up by Zoro nudging my side with his foot. I squinted my eyes at him and he said, "We're going." I stood up and he rolled his eyes and threw me over his shoulder. I yelped in surprise and light ponded on his back. I said, "Oi, Zoro. Let me go." H shrugged, while felt weird and said, "Just deal with it." I hung there until we got to the food place we went to before and he sat me down in a booth and Nami crawled in next to me. I blushed in embarrassment and Luffy and Zoro sat across from us. Food was brought to us and I scarfed it down, forgetting I was still hurt. Luffy had a bone in his mouth and Kaya came through the door and Nami asked, "Is I okay for you to be out of bed?" She came over to us and said, Yeah, you see, the mental illness is from the shock of losing my parents. And Usopp's friendship helped me get better. I can stay in bed forever, you know. You all done so much for me, and I came to give you a present from the bottom of my heart to show how grateful I am for all that you done here. I'd be honored for you to accept it, she finished with a closed-eyed smile. W followed her to the shore and saw some guy that looked like a sheep with a suit and a boat with a lamb's head. My eyes widened as a large grin appeared on my face. Is that ship for us? Oh my Cammy. A real ship? Luffy yelled with his hands in the air. Are you giving this to us? Kaya nodded. Yep. I stretched my stiff muscles. When I was sleeping, Nami fixed me up and said that was all she could do was bandaging me up. The slashed would heal themselves in time. I had bandages on my torso, upper arms, and extra for my back and partly on my upper thighs, which was under my clothes, so they weren't that seeable. I was brought back when I heard screaming from upward. Luffy asked. Hey, what's he doing? It was Usopp and Zoro's Zaid. I have no idea, but he's on a collision course with our boat. I frowned and whined. No, not the boat. What? I like it, and we haven't even had it for 5 minutes. We stopped him by stepping on his face. Well, I got his chest to stop him. I looked at the boat and said to Luffy. Hey, Luffy, I'll race you to the boat. I ran to it and I heard him shout. Hey, no fair. Cheater. I jumped on the boat, but Luffy's rubber arms stopped me and we tumbled on the boat and we started rolling around. I called. Ha, I win, he yelled. No you didn't, I said. Yeah I did, you cheated. He stuck his tongue out at me and said. So did you? I pushed him and he pushed me, but before we could start wrestling and fighting on the deck, Nami punched us both in the head. I groaned and rubbed my head. Why'd you do that? She huffed and yelled as we walked away. Grow up, both of you. I got up with a grin and helped Luffy up and started laughing, and Zoro looked it up with a smirk. We were hanging on the railing and heard Usopp say. You guys take care. I hope we meet again sometime. I looked at him confused and Luffy said. How come? Usopp said. What are you, antisocial or something? I'm taking up the life of the high seas. It's that we'll eventually meet again, that's all? Zoro asked him. What are you taking about? Get on already. He looked confused and I said. Get on the boat, Luffy said. We're friends, right? Get on the boat. I grinned and waited for his reaction. He said. This is it. I'm a pirate captain now. I lapped my palm to my forehead and waited for Luffy's pout burst. It didn't take long. Don't be stupid, Usopp. I'm the captain. Zoro. Me and Nami started laughing. I knew that one would never fly. We were soon laughing and Usopp got on. We were sailing away and I sat down, my back against the wall. Luffy pulled my arm and said. Aki, come on. I got up and followed him. We filled mugs with ale and Luffy called out when we each had a glass. Cheers to a new ship and crewmen. We clinked mugs and I started laughing, happy and carefree. Nami was laughing and I thought she wasn't that bad. Our talk by the shore about guys like Kuro helped too. I knew she would never be like that. Just a little violent with a scary temper. I finished the drink and was too tired to even go to a normal room. I said. Nice to have you on the crew, Usopp. This crew, I would protect them with my life. I crawled to the deck and laid on my back with my arms wide open and in a relaxed position. I closed my eyes and heard Luffy yelling something, but I ignored it. I then fell into a peaceful sleep. The chapter is finally done and the length can make up for how long it took, I think. 2 weeks, but the longest chapter I ever written. Please tell what you think and I want to know who you think she should be with the exception of Luffy and Ace.